The courtroom was silent except for one sound, a 4-year-old girl crying for her mother. Nora Wells gripped the wooden railing, powerless, as a man she hadn't seen in 5 years demanded custody of the daughter he had abandoned. Across the room, a billionaire sat perfectly still, watching everything fall apart. Ethan Blake had built empires with a single phone call, but here, in this moment, all his money meant nothing, unless he broke his promise. Unless he stepped forward and destroyed the one thing Nora valued more than her daughter's safety, her independence. Stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. Ethan Blake checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes, the Patek Philippe catching the afternoon light filtering through the streaked windows. 32 years old, and he was sitting in a place where the menu was laminated and the chairs didn't match. His sister owed him for this. Just one date, Rebecca had said over the phone last week, her voice carrying that particular blend of pestering and sisterly affection that he'd never learned to ignore. You can't spend your entire life in boardrooms and on airplanes, Ethan. Emma needs stability. She needs to see that relationships are possible. His daughter, 5 years old, brilliant, and far too perceptive for her age. Emma had started asking questions about why she didn't have a mother like the other kids at her private school. Questions Ethan couldn't answer without explaining that her mother had signed away parental rights before Emma's first birthday, choosing a settlement over motherhood. So here he was. Riverton, Pennsylvania, population 8,000. A town so small it didn't even have a Starbucks, let alone the kind of restaurants where Ethan normally conducted business over $30 appetizers. The blind date was 17 minutes late. Ethan looked around the cafe with the detached observation of someone analyzing an underperforming asset. Faded photographs of the town's history lined the walls. Coal mines, railway stations, people in clothes from decades past. The other patrons were locals, clearly. An elderly couple sharing a slice of pie. A teenager doing homework in the corner booth. A construction worker reading a newspaper at the counter. Normal people living normal lives. Ethan didn't fit here. His Tom Ford suit probably cost more than some of these people made in a month. His watch could pay someone's rent for a year. He knew it. They knew it. The 17-year-old girl behind the counter had actually stammered when he'd ordered coffee. He should leave. Text Rebecca some excuse about a business emergency. It wouldn't even be a lie. There was always a business emergency somewhere in his empire. His phone had buzzed 6 times since he'd sat down, but something made him stay. Maybe it was the promise he'd made to his sister. Maybe it was the memory of Emma's face when he told her he had a meeting this afternoon, and the way her eyes had lit up when Rebecca had accidentally let slip it was a date. Daddy might find someone nice, Emma had said, with the simple confidence of a child who still believed in happy endings. Ethan didn't believe in happy endings. He believed in contracts, negotiations, and calculated risks. Love was just chemistry and convenience dressed up in poetry. The bell above the door chimed. A woman stepped inside, and Ethan's first thought was that she looked exhausted. Not in the way people looked after a long day at the office. This was something deeper. The kind of tired that lived in the bones. She was around 30, he estimated. Simple jeans and a cardigan that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup that he could see. No jewelry except for a thin silver bracelet that looked handmade. Her eyes scanned the cafe, and when they landed on him, something flickered across her face. Recognition? Surprise? It was gone before he could identify it. She walked over to his table, slightly out of breath. Ethan? Her voice was quiet, steady. Nora? He stood, the ingrained manners from his boarding school education kicking in automatically. I'm so sorry I'm late. She slid into the seat across from him, setting down a worn canvas bag. The bus was delayed, and then She stopped herself. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry. She took the bus. When was the last time Ethan had been on public transportation? College, maybe? It's fine, he said, sitting back down. I just got here myself. It was a small lie, the kind people told on first dates. She probably knew it was a lie, but she smiled anyway. A soft, genuine smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I get you ladies anything? The teenage waitress appeared at their table, notepad ready. Just water, please, Nora said. Ethan watched her carefully, not ordering anything else. Was it because she wasn't hungry or because she was watching her budget? He thought of the designer coffee he'd left half finished. And a coffee for me. Actually, he looked at Nora. Have you eaten? They have sandwiches. My sister mentioned their club sandwich is good. Water's fine, thank you. There was something in the way she said it, polite but firm, drawing a line. The waitress left and silence settled between them. Ethan had negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs, addressed shareholders, pitched investors. He'd never been uncomfortable in a business meeting. This wasn't a business meeting. So, Nora said, saving him from the awkward silence, Rebecca didn't tell me much about you, just that you're visiting town for a few days. Visiting, as if he'd come here on purpose, rather than being emotionally blackmailed by his sister who'd decided to spend the summer in her old college friend's farmhouse finding herself after her divorce. Business trip, Ethan said, which was partially true. He'd combined the visit with checking on a manufacturing facility 2 hours north. What about you? Rebecca said you grew up here? Born and raised. Nora's fingers traced the condensation on her water glass. I left for a while. College. Tried city life, but I came back about 5 years ago. What brought you back? Something shuddered in her expression. Family stuff. Family stuff. The universal conversation ender. Ethan recognized it because he used similar phrases himself. Business complications. Scheduling conflicts. The polite walls people built to keep others out. He should probably respect that wall, but something made him push gently. Good family stuff or complicated family stuff? Nora looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment her carefully neutral expression cracked. Is there any other kind? Despite himself, Ethan smiled. Fair point. The waitress brought their drinks. Nora thanked her by name, Casey, and asked about her mother's hip surgery. Small town things, everyone knowing everyone. It was so foreign to Ethan's world of anonymity and crowds, of knowing hundreds of people professionally and maybe 3 personally. Rebecca didn't tell me much about you either, Nora said when Casey left, except that you're her brother and that you needed to get out more. She made air quotes, a small smile playing at her lips. My sister has opinions about my social life, or lack thereof. Let me guess, you work too much, don't date enough, and need to live a little? You've met Rebecca, Nora laughed. It was a nice laugh, unexpected and genuine. She gave me almost the same speech about myself last week at the community center. I volunteer there sometimes. She'd brought her niece for story time. Emma. Rebecca had been taking Emma to everything in this town. Story time, the farmer's market, the park. Trying to give her a normal childhood experience, as if Emma's life in Manhattan, with private schools and museum trips, wasn't normal enough. Her niece Emma, Ethan said. My daughter. Oh. Nora's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding. Rebecca mentioned you were a single parent. That must be challenging. Challenging. Another polite word for complicated reality. It has its moments. What about you? Rebecca mentioned you have a daughter too. The shuttered look returned. Mia, she's 4. 4 years old, around Emma's age. The thought came automatically. They could have play dates if things went well. If this turned into something... Ethan stopped himself. He was already planning future scenarios when he hadn't even decided if he wanted a second date. This was the problem with being a strategist. Always 3 steps ahead, always planning for contingencies. What does Mia think about you being on a blind date? He asked, then immediately regretted the question when Nora's fingers tightened around her glass. She's with a friend today. She doesn't know this is a date. I told her I had an appointment. An appointment. Like going to the dentist or the DMV. Ethan couldn't decide if that was sad or relatable. Emma knows, he admitted. She was unreasonably excited about it. Drew me a picture of a princess and a prince for good luck. He didn't mention that he'd tucked that picture in his wallet like a talisman. Nora's expression softened. That's sweet. That's Emma. She believes in fairy tales. And you don't? The question caught him off guard. Ethan looked at this woman across from him, tired eyes, worn clothes, careful boundaries, and wondered what her story was. What had brought her back to this small town? What had put that particular brand of exhaustion in her bones? I believe in what I can quantify, he said finally. Profit margins. Market trends. Risk assessments. That sounds lonely. It was. But Ethan had learned a long time ago that lonely was safer than vulnerable. It's practical, he said. Nora took a sip of her water, studying him over the rim of the glass. Rebecca said you're different from what she expected. She told you that? She said you used to be softer. Before... Nora stopped herself. I'm sorry. That's too personal for a first meeting. Before his ex-wife left. Before he'd learned that love was just another transaction that could fall through. Before he'd built walls so high that even his sister needed a blind date ambush to try to scale them. It's okay, Ethan said. Rebecca's not wrong. I was different. Life has a way of filing down the soft edges. Or maybe, Nora said quietly, we just hide them better. The observation was too insightful, too close to truths Ethan didn't examine even in private. He deflected the way he always did, by changing the subject. So what do you do? For work? I work at the library, part-time, and I do some freelance bookkeeping for local businesses. She said it matter-of-factly, without pride or shame. Just facts. A librarian and a bookkeeper. Ethan tried to imagine what she made annually and felt a twist of something uncomfortable in his chest. He spent more on Emma's birthday party last year than Nora probably earned in 6 months. Do you like it? The library? Nora considered this. Yes, I do. Books don't judge you. They're just there, waiting, patient. Unlike people, Ethan filled in silently, unlike life. And the bookkeeping? Pays the bills? She smiled, but there was strain behind it. Or most of them, anyway. Most of them. Ethan's mind automatically went to problem-solving mode. What bills wasn't she paying? Rent? Utilities? Medical? He could... No. That was exactly the kind of thinking that got him in trouble. The savior complex, his therapist kept pointing out. Not everyone wanted to be saved, especially by money. The library here is actually beautiful, Nora continued, her voice warming. It's in this old Carnegie building from 1912. Original woodwork, these huge windows. They're renovating the children's section right now, which is why I'm part-time. Once it reopens, I'll be back to full hours. There was affection in her voice when she talked about the library. Real affection, the kind people usually reserved for family or places that meant something. You really love it. It saved my life once, Nora said simply. Then, seeing his expression, she shook her head. That sounds dramatic. I just mean, when I was younger, going through some difficult times, the library was where I felt safe, where I could disappear into other worlds for a while. Difficult times. More careful language, more walls. Ethan understood walls. I get that, he said. Books as an escape. Did you have a place like that when you were younger? The question was casual, but something about the way she asked it, genuinely curious, not just making conversation, made Ethan actually think about his answer. The observation deck of my boarding school, he said finally. Top floor of the science building. You could see the whole city from there. I used to go up there and just watch. All these people living their lives, completely unaware that some kid was watching from above, wondering what it would be like to be normal. He hadn't thought about that deck in years. Hadn't thought about that lonely kid in even longer. Nora's expression shifted into something that looked like understanding. Boarding school, that must have been hard. It was expensive education. That's not what I asked. No, it wasn't. Ethan took a drink of his coffee, which had gone cold. The cafe had gotten busier. The dinner crowd, such as it was, starting to trickle in. The sun was lower now, golden light slanting through those streaked windows, catching dust motes in the air. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Sure. Why did you agree to this? The blind date. You don't seem like the kind of man who gets pushed into things he doesn't want to do. Perceptive. Too perceptive. My sister can be persuasive. That's not an answer. No, Ethan admitted. It's not. They looked at each other across the chipped formica table, two strangers who'd been pushed into proximity by well-meaning interference. The smart thing would be to finish this coffee, shake hands, thank her for her time, and never see her again. But there was something about the way Nora was looking at him, not impressed by his suit or his watch or the quiet confidence that money bought, just looking. seeing. Emma asked me if I was lonely, Ethan said. Last week, out of nowhere. She looked up from her drawing and asked if I was lonely. What did you tell her? I told her I had her, so how could I be lonely? And what did she say? Ethan smiled despite himself. She told me that wasn't how loneliness worked, that you could be with people and still be lonely. She's 5 and apparently more emotionally intelligent than I am. She sounds remarkable. She is. He meant it. Emma was the one purely good thing in his life, the one decision he'd never questioned. Mia's the same way, Nora said softly. Sometimes I think she's raising me instead of the other way around. Does her father... Ethan started, then stopped. Too personal. They'd been doing well avoiding the truly personal questions, but Nora answered anyway. He's not in the picture. His choice. His choice. Such a simple phrase for what was probably a complicated, painful story. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. There was certainty in her voice, and something else. Relief, maybe. Or hard-won peace. The bell above the door chimed again. A woman entered with 2 children, and one of them, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6, ran straight to their table. Miss Nora, look! He held up a book triumphantly. I finished the whole thing. Nora's face transformed. The careful neutrality disappeared, replaced by genuine joy. Tommy, that's wonderful. Did you like it? It was so good. Can I get the next one, please? Of course. Come by the library on Monday and I'll have it waiting for you. Thank you. The boy hugged her impulsively, then ran back to his mother, who waved apologetically. The interaction lasted maybe 30 seconds, but Ethan saw something in it that caught him off guard. The way Nora's whole demeanor changed, the way the kid trusted her completely, the way she'd promised to have a book waiting, and Ethan knew without question that she would, that she probably kept a mental list of all the kids and what they were reading and what they might like next. Sorry, Nora said, turning back to him. That's Tommy. He's been struggling with reading, and we've been working together to find books that excite him. You didn't have to apologize. Most people find it annoying when... I'm not most people. The words came out more intensely than he'd intended. Nora blinked, caught off guard. Before either of them could speak, Nora's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and concern flashed across her face. I'm sorry, I have to... She read the text, her frown deepening. My babysitter, Mia's running a fever. She was already standing, gathering her bag. Is she okay? Ethan asked. Probably just a cold, but I need to get home. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. Go. Nora hesitated, halfway to the door, turned back. I'm glad we did this. Even if it was Rebecca's scheming. Me too. And surprisingly, he meant it. Maybe we could... Nora started, then stopped. Her phone buzzed again. I really have to go. Go. We'll figure it out. She nodded and hurried out, the bell chiming her exit. Ethan sat there for a long moment, staring at the door she'd disappeared through. He should feel relieved. The obligation was fulfilled. He could tell Rebecca he'd tried and Emma that he'd had a date, and everyone would be happy. Instead, he felt unsettled. He pulled out his wallet to pay, far too much money for a coffee and a water, and something caught his eye. A bracelet on the chair where Nora had been sitting. The thin silver one she'd been wearing. Ethan picked it up. Handmade, definitely. The kind of cheap craftsmanship that came from love rather than skill. There were little charms on it. A book, a star, a tiny letter M. For Mia. He should have left it with Casey to hold for her. That would have been the logical thing. Instead, he pocketed it and walked out into the cooling evening. Rebecca's borrowed farmhouse was 15 minutes outside town, down a road that turned from pavement to gravel and finally to dirt. Ethan's rental car, a Mercedes that now had a coating of Pennsylvania dust, looked absurdly out of place in the driveway. His sister was on the porch swing with Emma, both of them wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. Daddy! Emma launched herself at him before he'd even gotten out of the car. He caught her, lifting her up. Hey, sweetheart, what are you still doing up? Aunt Becca said I could stay up late because it's special that you're here. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. How was your appointment? Rebecca appeared behind them, smirking. Ethan gave her a look that promised sibling retribution later. It was nice, he told Emma. The lady was very kind. Was she pretty? Emma, what? Aunt Becca says pretty people are nicer to look at. That's why she wears lipstick. Aunt Becca says a lot of things, Ethan said, setting Emma down and shooting his sister another look. Rebecca just grinned, unrepentant. How did it go? Really? Fine. She had to leave early. Her daughter was sick. Oh no, is Mia okay? Just a fever, I think. Ethan realized he didn't actually know. He'd let Nora rush off without getting details. That's too bad. Nora's had a rough year. Rebecca's voice softened. She's one of the good ones, Ethan. Really. I know. Something in his tone made Rebecca study him more carefully. You like her. I met her for 20 minutes. And? And she's… What? Tired and guarded and clearly struggling and somehow still genuinely kind? Interesting. Interesting. Wow. Don't overwhelm me with enthusiasm. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, can we go to the library tomorrow? Aunt Becca says they have a whole room just for kids with a castle. A library, where Nora worked. We'll see, Em. That's what you say when you mean yes, but don't want to promise. Emma had learned to decode his corporate speak at an alarming age. It means we'll see. Please, I want to see the castle. Rebecca bent down to Emma's level. Why don't you go inside and pick out a bedtime story? I need to talk to your dad for a minute. Emma looked between them suspiciously, but eventually skipped inside, leaving the two siblings alone in the gathering dark. She left her bracelet, Ethan said, pulling it from his pocket. At the café, Rebecca took it, examined the cheap charms. She made this. Mia gave it to her for Mother's Day last year. How do you know that? Because I pay attention to people, Ethan. You should try it sometime. But her voice was gentle. Nora doesn't have much, but what she has, she cherishes. I noticed. Did you? Rebecca handed the bracelet back. Or did you just see someone struggling and start planning how to fix everything? The observation hit too close to home. I wasn't… You were. You always do. It's one of your best and worst qualities. She settled back onto the swing. Nora doesn't need saving, Ethan. She needs respect. There's a difference. I know there's a difference. Do you? Because I've watched you throw money at problems for years, thinking that's the same as actually caring. That's not fair, isn't it? Rebecca's voice was sad now, not accusing. When was the last time you actually let someone in? Actually trusted someone with more than surface-level interaction? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. She's been through a lot, Rebecca continued. The kind of a lot that makes you careful about who you trust. So if you're going to pursue this, and I think you should, don't do it halfway. Don't do it because I pushed you into a blind date, or because Emma wants you to be less lonely. Do it because you actually want to know her. I don't even know if I'll see her again. You're holding her bracelet and asking about the library. You'll see her again. Rebecca stood, stretched. Just be careful with her, okay? Some people's hearts have been broken too many times to risk on someone who isn't sure. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and a cheap silver bracelet that probably meant the world to its owner. He sat on the porch steps, looking out at the darkness of rural Pennsylvania. No light pollution here. You could actually see stars. He thought about Nora's question. Why had he agreed to this date? The truth was more complicated than Rebecca's persuasiveness or Emma's loneliness or even his own. The truth was that somewhere in his calculated, controlled life, Ethan had started wondering if this was all there was. Success and money and a daughter he loved but couldn't quite reach. An existence that looked perfect from the outside and felt hollow from within. His phone buzzed. A work email about the quarterly projections, a text from his assistant about a meeting on Monday. Another text from his lawyer about custody paperwork. That was technically unnecessary since Emma's mother wanted nothing to do with her, but Ethan liked having legal documentation of everything. He typed out responses mechanically, his mind elsewhere, on a woman with tired eyes and careful boundaries who lit up when a kid showed her a finished book, on a bracelet made with more love than skill, on the question of whether he could be the kind of man who deserved to know someone like Nora Wells. His phone buzzed again. Not work this time. A text from an unknown local number. This is Nora. Rebecca gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I think I left my bracelet at the cafe. If you see it, could you let me know? Ethan looked at the bracelet in his hand. He could text back that he had it. Offered to drop it off tomorrow. Simple, clean, transactional. Instead, he typed, I have it. How's Mia? The response came quickly. Better. Tylenol worked. Just a cold. Thank you for asking. Emma wants to visit the library tomorrow. See the castle in the kids section. Would that be okay? A longer pause this time. Ethan could imagine her staring at the text, trying to decode what he really meant, whether this was about returning the bracelet or something else. The children's section is closed for renovation, but I could give her a tour if you'd like. 10 a.m.? Perfect. See you then. He pocketed his phone and the bracelet and went inside to read Emma a bedtime story about princesses and happy endings that he still wasn't sure he believed in. But maybe, just maybe, he was willing to try. The library stood on the corner of Main and 4th, a limestone building that looked like it had been transported from another era. Emma pressed her face against the car window as Ethan pulled into one of the angled parking spots out front. It looks like a castle, she breathed. It's just a library, Em. Just a library. Daddy, look at it. Ethan looked. She wasn't entirely wrong. The building had that early 20th century grandeur that modern architecture had abandoned. Arched windows, carved stone details, a copper roof gone green with age. The kind of building that had been constructed when people still believed public spaces should inspire. They were 10 minutes early. Ethan had timed it that way, though he wouldn't have admitted it if asked. Emma bounced on her toes as they walked up the stone steps, her hand in his. The heavy wooden door swung open before they reached it. Nora stood in the entrance, and Ethan's first thought was that she looked different in daylight. More real, somehow. Less like the careful stranger from the cafe, and more like an actual person. She wore jeans again and a simple gray sweater. Her hair was down today, falling past her shoulders. The bracelet was absent from her wrist. Because he still had it, Ethan remembered with a pang of guilt. You must be Emma, Nora said, smiling down at his daughter. Emma, who was usually shy around strangers for at least 30 seconds, beamed up at her. Are you the library lady? I am, and you must be the girl who wants to see a castle. Is there really one? A real one? Come see for yourself. Nora led them inside, and even Ethan, who'd been to museums and galleries across 3 continents, felt a small catch of appreciation. The main hall had a vaulted ceiling, tall windows that let in streams of morning light, and rows of dark wooden shelves that smelled like old paper and possibility. It's beautiful, he said, and meant it. Isn't it? Nora's voice carried that same affection he'd heard yesterday. Most people just see an old building, but it's more than that, Ethan finished. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. The recognition of 2 people who'd learned to find value in things others overlooked. The children's section is this way, Nora said, breaking the moment. Though I should warn you, it's a bit of a mess right now. She led them through a doorway at the back of the main hall, down a corridor lined with old photographs. Emma chattered the whole way, asking questions faster than Nora could answer them. How many books were in the library? Could she check them all out at once? Did Nora live here? Did she have a favorite book? I have lots of favorite books, Nora said. Different ones for different moods. What's your favorite today? The question seemed to catch Nora off guard. She glanced back at Ethan, who shrugged. Emma's questions often had that effect on people. Today, I think it's The Velveteen Rabbit, Nora said finally. Why that one? Because it's about becoming real, and sometimes that's harder than it sounds. Emma considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could manage when discussing philosophy. Is it sad? Parts of it, but the good kind of sad. There's a good kind? Emma, Ethan said gently, maybe let Miss Nora finish the tour before you interview her. But Nora was smiling. It's okay. I like questions. They reached a set of double doors. Nora pushed them open, and Emma gasped. The children's section was indeed a mess. Drop cloths everywhere, paint cans stacked in corners, sawdust coating every surface. But rising from the center of the chaos was a wooden structure that did, in fact, look like a small castle. Turrets and crenellations and a little drawbridge entrance. They're building it? Emma whispered, awestruck. Almost finished, Nora said. Another week or two. When it's done, kids will be able to go inside and read. There'll be cushions and lights and everything. Emma tugged on Ethan's hand. Can I go look? Carefully, Nora said, and don't touch the wet paint. Emma took off, leaving the adult standing in the doorway. This is incredible, Ethan said. Who funded it? Anonymous donor. Came through about 6 months ago. Enough to renovate the whole section. New books, new furniture, the castle reading nook. It's been a dream. An anonymous donor. Ethan's mind automatically went to the kind of people who made anonymous donations. Corporations looking for tax breaks. Wealthy individuals wanting to avoid publicity. Foundations with specific mandates. That's generous. It saved us. The library board was talking about closing the children's section completely. We couldn't afford the updates required by the new building codes. Nora's voice tightened. This town doesn't have much, but the library, kids need this place. You really love it here. I spent half my childhood in this room. She gestured around the construction chaos. Back when it was just old carpet and mismatched chairs. But it was safe and free, and no one asked questions about why you were here instead of home. There was a story in those words, a painful one, Ethan suspected. But before he could respond, Emma called out, Daddy, look, you can see the whole library from up here. What? She'd climbed carefully up the castle's small ladder and was peering out from one of the turret windows. I see you, sweetheart. Be careful. She's fine, Nora said. It's sturdy. The contractor did good work. They watched Emma explore, her delighted laughter echoing off the high ceiling. Ethan found himself standing closer to Nora than strictly necessary, their shoulders almost touching. I have your bracelet, he said quietly. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. I forgot. It's okay. I have others. But that one's special. Nora glanced at him, surprised. How did you... Your sister mentioned Mia made it. Rebecca talks too much. She cares about you. I know. Nora's voice softened. She's been a good friend, especially this past year. This past year. Another carefully vague reference to something difficult. Ethan wanted to ask but didn't know how without seeming intrusive. Emma climbed down from the castle and immediately started investigating the bookshelves that lined the walls. Even covered in drop cloths, you could see the spines underneath, hundreds of colorful volumes waiting to be discovered. Can we come back when it's open? Emma asked. Please? We're only here for a few more days, Em. The disappointment on his daughter's face was sharp and immediate. Ethan felt it like a physical thing, the way he always did when he had to be the parent who said no. You could come visit, Nora said, and both Ethan and Emma turned to look at her. She seemed surprised by her own words. I mean, if you wanted, when it's finished. The grand reopening is in 3 weeks. We live in New York, Ethan said. Oh, right, of course. Nora's cheeks colored slightly. I just thought, never mind. But we could come back, Emma said, that 5-year-old determination settling into her voice. Couldn't we, Daddy? 3 weeks isn't that long. It wasn't. And it also was. Ethan had meetings, commitments, a company to run. He couldn't just decide to drive 3 hours to Pennsylvania for a library reopening, except he could. That was the thing about being his own boss. He could do whatever he wanted. Maybe, he heard himself say. That means yes, Emma announced confidently. That means maybe. But Emma was already making plans, chattering about what she'd wear and which books she'd read first and whether the castle would have a name. Nora caught Ethan's eye, and there was amusement there, but also something else. Caution, maybe, as if she was wondering what she'd just invited into her life. Join the club, Ethan thought. A door opened somewhere in the building, and a child's voice called out, Mom, where are you? In here, Mia. The little girl who appeared in the doorway was small for 4, with dark curls that went in every direction and her mother's careful eyes. She stopped when she saw strangers, her hand reaching for the doorframe. It's okay, Nora said. This is Emma and her dad. They came to see the castle. Mia studied them both with an intensity that reminded Ethan of Emma at that age, weighing, measuring, deciding if they were safe. Then Emma smiled at her and something shifted. Hi, Emma said. I like your shoes. Mia looked down at her light-up sneakers, the kind that flashed with every step.
Thanks. I like your dress. It has pockets. Want to see? And just like that, the girls were friends. They disappeared into the castle together, their voices blending into excited chatter. Nora visibly relaxed. Sorry, she's been clingy lately. Stranger danger phase. Emma went through that around 3. Wouldn't talk to anyone except me and Rebecca for 6 months.
How did you get her past it? Time, and a very patient preschool teacher. Ethan paused. She doesn't have that many kids to play with. Our building in the city, it's mostly professionals, not a lot of children. Mia's the same way here. Small town. You'd think there'd be kids everywhere, but Nora shrugged. Most young families leave, looking for better opportunities. The ones who stay, they're usually busy trying to make ends meet. Not a lot of time for playdates. From inside the castle came a shriek of laughter. Both parents moved instinctively toward the sound, then relaxed when they realized it was joy, not injury. They sound happy, Nora said. Yeah. They stood there in the dusty construction zone, watching their daughters play, and Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not the constant low-level anxiety he usually carried. Not the restless need to be doing something productive. Just peace. It scared him more than he wanted to admit. Nora, he started, then stopped. What was he going to say? That he wanted to see her again? That the brief date yesterday had been on his mind all night? That standing here in this half-finished library felt more real than most of his actual life? She turned to look at him, waiting. Would you want to... His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. The particular pattern that meant emergency, meant crisis, meant drop everything. I'm sorry, I have to... He pulled it out, already knowing what he'd see. His CFO. 3 missed calls. It's okay, take it. Ethan stepped into the hallway, pressing the callback button. Marcus, what's wrong? The Tecton deal is falling apart. They want to renegotiate the terms. I've got them on hold, but they need an answer in the next hour, or they're walking. The Tecton deal. 6 months of negotiations. A $12 million acquisition that would expand his company's reach into the Asian market. Critical. Important. Exactly the kind of thing that required his immediate attention. Send me the new terms. I'll review and call you back in 20. Ethan, this is... 20 minutes, Marcus. I'll handle it. He hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone. Back in New York, this would have been simple. He'd already be in his office, documents pulled up, legal on standby. Here, he was in a small-town library wearing casual clothes, with his daughter playing in a wooden castle and a woman waiting who deserved better than to be interrupted by business. When he came back inside, Nora was helping the girls down from the castle. Emma's hair had somehow acquired sawdust. I have to go, Ethan said. Work emergency. I'm sorry. Of course. Nora's voice was carefully neutral. These things happen. Can we come back? Emma asked immediately. Please? Mia said she has books at home about fairies, and I really want to see them. Ethan looked at Nora, who looked back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. We'll see, he said, which made Emma groan because she knew what that meant. Actually, Nora said slowly, if you're not busy this afternoon, Mia and I usually go to the park around 3. If Emma wanted to join us, she stopped, seemed to reconsider. But you're probably busy. Never mind. The park? Emma's eyes went wide with hope. Ethan's phone buzzed again. The Tecton deal wouldn't wait. But he looked at his daughter's face, at the first real friend she'd made in months, at the woman who was offering something despite having every reason to keep her distance. 3 o'clock, he said. Which park? Riverside. It's small, but there's a good playground. You can't miss it. We'll be there, Emma cheered. Mia smiled shyly, and Nora looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or might have been concern. Maybe both. They said their goodbyes and walked back to the car. Emma talked non-stop about Mia and the castle and the park later. Ethan made appropriate sounds while his mind calculated how quickly he could handle the Tecton crisis and whether he'd have time to eat lunch. His phone rang before they'd even left the parking lot. The next 4 hours were a blur of conference calls and document reviews. Rebecca took Emma for lunch while Ethan negotiated with lawyers and accountants and executives who didn't understand why he wasn't in the office handling this in person.
I'm in Pennsylvania for personal reasons, he said for the third time to his company's general counsel. For how long? As long as it takes. Which wasn't an answer, but it was all he had. By 2:30, the deal was back on track. Modified terms, new timelines, everyone appeased. Ethan closed his laptop, feeling the familiar exhaustion that came from forcing multiple powerful egos to agree on something. Rebecca found him on the porch, staring at nothing. You look like you've been through a war, she observed. Corporate negotiations, close enough. Did you win? Nobody wins in negotiations. You just find the least painful compromise. She sat down next to him. Emma says you're going to the park. Apparently, with Nora and Mia. Yes, Rebecca. With Nora and Mia. Is there a point to this interrogation? Just wondering if you know what you're doing. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have no idea what I'm doing. Good, that's progress. How is confusion progress? Because you're usually so damn sure about everything. It's refreshing to see you uncertain. Rebecca nudged his shoulder. She's special, Ethan. Nora, don't mess this up. I barely know her, so get to know her. That's kind of how relationships work. This isn't a relationship, it's... He stopped. What was it? A blind date that had lasted 20 minutes, a coincidental meeting at a library, plans to meet at a park. None of it added up to a relationship, but it was something. Emma came running out, already changed into play clothes. Is it time? Can we go? Almost. Go wash your hands. She disappeared back inside, and Rebecca gave him a knowing look. What? Ethan asked. You're nervous. I'm not nervous. You're doing that thing with your jaw. You always do that when you're nervous. Ethan consciously relaxed his jaw. I'm fine. Uh-huh. Rebecca stood, stretched. Well, have fun at your definitely not a date play date. Try not to check your phone every 5 minutes. I don't. You do, and it's annoying. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Ethan, let Emma just be a kid today. Don't make this some kind of networking opportunity or life lesson. Just let her play. The observation stung because it was accurate. Ethan had a tendency to turn everything into a teaching moment, to optimize every experience for maximum developmental benefit. It was exhausting for both of them. I'll try, he said. Good enough. Riverside Park was exactly as advertised. Small, with a playground that had seen better days but was clean and safe. Nora and Mia were already there when Ethan and Emma arrived. The girls ran to each other like they'd been separated for weeks instead of hours. They're adorable, Nora said, watching them claim the swings. Terrifying, you mean? She laughed. That too. They sat on a bench near the playground, close enough to supervise, but far enough to give the girls space. The afternoon was warm, the kind of late spring day that promised summer wasn't far off. How was your work emergency? Nora asked. Managed. The joys of running a company. Crises don't take days off. What kind of company? Tech acquisition and development. We buy struggling tech companies, restructure them, and either turn them around or integrate their assets into our existing portfolio. Nora was quiet for a moment. That sounds complicated. It is, but it's what I'm good at. Do you enjoy it? The question caught him off guard. No one asked him that. They asked if it was profitable, if it was growing, if it was sustainable, not if he enjoyed it. I don't think about it in those terms, he said finally. Why not? Because enjoyment isn't the point. Success is. That sounds lonely. It was the second time she'd said that about his life. Ethan wanted to argue, to defend his choices, but he found he couldn't. Push me higher, Emma called from the swings. Ethan stood automatically, but Nora touched his arm. I've got it. You look exhausted. She walked over to the swings before he could protest, and Ethan watched as she pushed both girls, their laughter rising into the afternoon air. Mia kept turning to look at her mother, checking that she was still there, still present. Emma just laughed, fearless as always. His phone buzzed. Ethan looked at it, then made a conscious decision to put it away. Rebecca was right. He could go an hour without checking email. Nora came back, slightly out of breath. They've requested the slide next. Of course they have. They watched the girls climb up the ladder, slide down, run around to do it again. Simple pleasures, endlessly repeated. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Sure. Yesterday, at the café,
You looked like you wanted to be anywhere else, but you stayed. Why? Ethan thought about lying, about giving some easy answer, but something about the way Nora asked, genuinely curious, not judging, made him tell the truth. My daughter asked me if I was lonely, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Are you lonely? I don't know. I have Emma. I have work. I have, he gestured vaguely, a life. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. Nora was quiet for a moment. Mia asked me something similar a few months ago. She wanted to know why we didn't have a daddy like the other kids. And I told her we were fine, just the two of us, that we didn't need anyone else. Did she believe you? No. Kids always know when you're lying. Nora smiled, but it was sad. The truth is, I've been so focused on surviving that I forgot to think about living. Work, bills, making sure Mia has what she needs. It's all I have energy for. That's not nothing. No, but it's not enough either. They sat with that truth between them, two people who'd built careful lives that protected them from hurt, but also from connection. Mom, Mia called, my shoe came untied. Nora went to fix it, and Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time he did check it. Another email from Marcus, nothing urgent. A text from his assistant about Monday's schedule. A reminder about Emma's dentist appointment next week. The machinery of his life, always running. When Nora came back, she had both girls with her. Mia's getting tired. We should probably head home. Already? Emma's disappointment was immediate and vocal. We've been here almost 2 hours, sweetheart, Ethan said, checking his watch and surprised by how fast the time had gone. Can Mia come over for dinner? Emma asked. Please, Aunt Becca is making spaghetti, and there's always too much. Ethan looked at Nora, who looked uncertain. You don't have to, she started. It's just spaghetti, Ethan said. And Emma's right. Rebecca always makes enough to feed an army. I don't want to impose. You're not. The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. I mean, if you're free. No pressure. Mia tugged on her mother's hand. Can we? Please. Nora looked between her daughter and Emma, both of them pleading with identical expressions of hope. Okay, she said finally, but just for dinner, we can't stay late. The girls cheered and ran ahead to the parking lot, already planning what games they'd play. You sure this is okay? Nora asked quietly. I'm sure. But as they walked to their separate cars, Ethan felt that unfamiliar flutter of nerves again. This wasn't a business dinner. There was no agenda, no objective, no clear outcome he was working toward. It was just dinner, just two single parents and their daughters sharing a meal. It terrified him. Rebecca, to her credit, took the news of unexpected dinner guests with grace. She immediately started pulling out extra plates and setting up the patio table, while Emma gave Mia a comprehensive tour of the farmhouse. Nora stood in the kitchen doorway, looking overwhelmed. Can I help? She asked for the third time. You can relax, Rebecca said firmly. Guest rules, no helping. I'm not good at relaxing. Join the club, Ethan muttered, earning a look from his sister. They ended up on the porch while Rebecca cooked. Nora perched on the railing like she might bolt at any moment. The evening light was going golden, that magic hour before sunset. This place is beautiful, Nora said. Your sister mentioned she's just here for the summer? Finding herself after her divorce. Her words, not mine. Is that what people do? Find themselves? Apparently. Though I've never understood what they're looking for. Nora smiled. Maybe they're not looking for something. Maybe they're looking for who they are without someone else defining them. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Maybe I am. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Emma and Mia came running out, breathless and laughing. Mia's never been on a farm before, Emma announced. Can we show her the chickens? They're not our chickens, Ethan said. They're Mrs. Patterson's chickens. But she lets us visit them. Nora looked uncertain. I don't know if... It's fine, Rebecca called from inside. I'll take them. Dinner won't be ready for 20 minutes anyway. She shepherded the girls across the yard toward the neighbor's property, leaving Ethan and Nora alone. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly, but full of things neither of them knew how to say. I should tell you something, Nora said finally, about yesterday, at the café. Okay. She took a breath like she was gathering courage. When I first saw you, I thought I recognized you, but I told myself I was wrong, that it couldn't be the same person. And then we started talking, and I kept waiting for you to remember, but you didn't. Remember what? Nora met his eyes. Do you remember the old library, before they built the new children's section, when it was just one big room with mismatched furniture? Vaguely. I haven't been here since I was a kid. You used to come sometimes, in the summers, when you visited your grandparents. Ethan's grandmother had lived in Riverton until she died when he was 15. He'd spent a handful of summers here, bored and lonely and counting the days until he could go back to boarding school. He barely remembered those summers. You were there too? He asked. I practically lived there. My home situation wasn't... She stopped, started again. The library was where I went when I needed to disappear. And there was this boy who came in sometimes. Always alone. Always reading in the corner. Pieces were clicking together in Ethan's mind, but the picture they formed didn't make sense. You remember me from the library? I remember you leaving food behind. Nora's voice went soft. On the table where I always sat, granola bars, fruit, once a whole sandwich, like you'd brought too much and forgotten it. But you did it too many times for it to be an accident. Ethan's breath caught. He did remember, not her specifically, but the summer he was 14, noticing a girl around his age who was always there, who wore the same clothes multiple days in a row, who never seemed to eat. He'd been too shy to talk to her, too unsure, so he'd done the only thing his awkward teenage self could think of. He'd left food behind, pretending it was an accident, pretending he hadn't noticed her at all. You were hungry, he said quietly. Most days. My mom she wasn't well, mentally, and my dad had left. The library was the only place that felt safe. I didn't know what to do, how to help without making me feel like a charity case. Nora smiled, but her eyes were bright. You were kind, even if you don't remember it, even if it seemed small to you. Those granola bars, some days they were all I ate. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. This woman sitting on his sister's porch railing, carefully guarded and quietly strong, had been that hungry kid in the library. And he'd been the boy too afraid to speak but too decent to look away. I'm sorry, he said. I should have done more. You were 14. What more could you have done? Talked to you? Told someone who could actually help? Maybe. But what you did, it was enough. It made me feel seen. Like I mattered, even if no one else noticed I existed. She wiped at her eyes quickly. Sorry, I didn't mean to get emotional about ancient history. It's not ancient history if it still matters. Doesn't it always? The things that shape us? Before Ethan could respond, Rebecca's voice called out, "Dinner's ready!" And the chicken adventure was apparently very successful. The girls came running back, talking over each other about chickens and eggs, and whether it hurt when chickens laid eggs. The moment broke, and they went inside to eat. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma and Mia dominated the conversation. Rebecca told embarrassing stories about Ethan's teenage years, and Nora slowly relaxed into the easy rhythm of the meal. She even laughed, really laughed, when Rebecca described the time Ethan had tried to impress a girl by cooking and nearly burned down the dormitory kitchen. I was 16, Ethan protested, and the fire was contained to one pot. The entire floor had to be evacuated. Minor detail. Nora smiled at him across the table, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Of the people they'd been and the people they'd become. After dinner, the girls played in the living room while the adults cleaned up. Nora insisted on helping this time, and Rebecca allowed it with good grace. I should get Mia home, Nora said when the kitchen was clean. It's past her bedtime. Already? Emma's protest was immediate but half-hearted. She was clearly exhausted too. They walked outside together, Mia half asleep on Nora's hip. The night had cooled, stars visible in the clear sky. Thank you, Nora said to Rebecca. For dinner, for everything. Come back any time. Really. They said their goodbyes and Ethan walked Nora to her car, an old sedan that had definitely seen better days. I meant to give you this, he said, pulling her bracelet from his pocket. Nora took it, slipping it back onto her wrist where it belonged. Thank you for keeping it safe. It's important. It is. They stood there in the driveway, neither quite ready to end the evening. About what I told you, Nora said quietly. About the library. I wasn't trying to make you feel guilty or, I know, and I'm glad you told me. Are you? Because sometimes I think it's easier to just let the past stay in the past. Maybe. But then we wouldn't really know each other. Do we? Know each other? Ethan thought about that. They'd spent maybe 6 hours together total. A blind date, a library tour, an afternoon at the park, a family dinner. It wasn't much, but it felt like more. I'd like to, he said. If you're willing. Nora looked up at him, and in the dim light from the porch, he could see the conflict on her face. Want and fear in equal measure. I'm leaving on Monday, she said. You're leaving. I am. And then this is just, what? A nice memory? It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it? Her voice was gentle but firm. You live in New York. I live here. You run a company. I shelve books. We're from different worlds, Ethan. So? So I've done this before. Let myself care about someone who was just passing through. And when they left, she stopped, shook her head. I can't do that again. And I won't let Mia get attached to someone who's going to disappear. I'm not planning to disappear. But you're planning to leave. She was right, and they both knew it. Monday morning, Ethan would drive back to the city, back to his life of boardrooms and quarterly reports. This, whatever this was, would become a story he told at dinner parties about a random encounter in a small town. Except it didn't feel random, and he didn't want it to be a story. 3 weeks, he said. The library reopening. Let me come back for that. Ethan, just think about it, please. Nora buckled Mia into the car seat, taking her time. When she straightened, her expression was unreadable. I'll think about it, she said finally. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. He watched her drive away, taillights disappearing down the dark country road. When he turned back to the house, Rebecca was on the porch, watching. You're in trouble, she observed. I know. Good trouble or bad trouble? Ethan thought about Nora's careful walls, about the hungry kid she'd been, and the fierce mother she'd become, about the way his chest had felt when she'd smiled at dinner, and the ache of watching her drive away. I don't know yet, he said. But as he followed his sister inside, one thing was certain. He couldn't just let this be a nice memory. He had 3 weeks to figure out what else it could be. Monday morning came too fast. Ethan packed Emma's things while she sat on the bed, unusually quiet. I don't want to leave, she said finally. I know, sweetheart. Can't we stay longer? Ethan zipped the suitcase closed. We have to get back. You have school, I have work. I hate work. He sat down beside her. You don't hate work. You hate that it takes me away sometimes. Same thing. Emma's lower lip trembled. Mia's my friend. What if I forget her? You won't forget her. But how do you know? Because some people changed you, Ethan wanted to say. Because 3 days in a small town had shifted something fundamental in both of them, and that kind of shift didn't just evaporate. We'll come back, he said instead, for the library opening, remember? You said maybe. I'm saying yes now. Emma looked up at him, hope warring with doubt in her expression. Really? Really? She threw her arms around him, and Ethan held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. 5 years old and already learning that the people you cared about left, that promises were fragile things. He needed to do better. Rebecca drove them to the highway, Emma waving out the back window until the farmhouse disappeared from view. Ethan's phone had already started buzzing with messages, meetings to reschedule, decisions that needed making, the 1,000 small fires that apparently only he could put out. You're going to come back, right? Rebecca asked. This isn't just something you're telling Emma to make the goodbye easier? I'm coming back. Good. Because Nora doesn't deserve to be another person who disappoints her. I'm not going to disappoint her. Rebecca gave him a long look. Make sure you don't. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet. Emma fell asleep within the first hour, and Ethan spent the remaining time trying not to think about the fact that he'd driven away from something he didn't fully understand but already missed. His apartment felt sterile after the warmth of the farmhouse. Too clean, too quiet, too much like a showroom, and not enough like a home. Emma noticed it too. "It's different here," she said, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time. "Different how?" "I don't know, just different." That night, after Emma was in bed, Ethan stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Millions of lights, millions of people, and he'd never felt more alone. His phone rang. Marcus probably, with another crisis, but the screen showed an unknown Pennsylvania number. "Hello?" "It's Nora." Her voice was hesitant. "Is this a bad time?" Ethan's heart did something stupid in his chest. "No, it's a good time. I just wanted to—" Mia wanted to say goodnight to Emma, if she's still awake. "She just went to bed, but I can get her." "Oh no, if she's already down—" "Hold on." He walked to Emma's room, where she was definitely not asleep, just lying there staring at the ceiling. "It's Mia," he said, holding out the phone. Emma's face lit up. She took the phone and immediately started chattering, and Ethan stepped back into the hallway to give her privacy. He could hear fragments of conversation, something about the chickens, about school tomorrow, about whether they could video chat. When Emma finally emerged, she was smiling. "Mia says her mom wants to talk to you." Ethan took the phone back. Hey. Nora sounded tired. "Sorry to call so late. Mia was upset about Emma leaving, and I thought maybe talking would help." "It did. Thank you." Silence on the line. Not awkward, but heavy with things unsaid. "I've been thinking," Nora said finally, "about what you said, about coming back. And I don't want Mia to get hurt. But I also don't want to protect her from everything good just because I'm scared of what might go wrong." "So what does that mean?" "It means yes. Come back for the opening. We'll see what happens." "We'll see what happens." It was the most uncertain promise Ethan had ever received, and somehow it meant everything. "I'll be there," he said. "Okay, good." A pause. "I should let you go. It's late." "Nora?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you called." "Me too. Good night, Ethan." The line went dead, and Ethan stood there holding his phone like an idiot, smiling at nothing. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Ethan threw himself into work with renewed focus, trying to ignore the countdown in the back of his mind. 15 days until the library opening. 12 days. 7. Emma marked off each day on her calendar with aggressive enthusiasm, reminding him constantly about his promise. "We're still going, right?" she'd ask every few days. "We're still going. You're not going to have a work thing? No work thing? Promise?" "Promise." But promises were easier made than kept. On day 9, the Singapore office imploded over a contract dispute that required his immediate attention. On day 6, his biggest investor threatened to pull out if Ethan didn't fly to California for an emergency meeting. On day 3, Marcus called to say the Tecton deal was falling apart again. "Handle it," Ethan told him. "Ethan, this needs you personally. Then they'll wait until Monday. I have plans this weekend." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "You never have plans on weekends." "I do now." He hung up before his CFO could argue further, then immediately texted Rebecca. "Still okay if Emma and I stay at the farmhouse Friday night?" Her response came immediately. "I left 2 weeks ago. House is locked up, but I can call Helen and have her open it for you." Ethan stared at the message, only now realizing his sister hadn't actually mentioned when she was leaving. He'd been so buried in work he hadn't even noticed. "That would be great," he typed back. "Thanks." Her next message made him smile despite himself. "Don't screw this up." "I won't," he promised. On Thursday evening, Emma was too excited to sleep. She'd laid out her outfit for the next day, twice, and made Ethan promise they'd leave early enough to stop for breakfast somewhere nice. "Will Mia remember me?" she asked for the 100th time. "Of course she'll remember you. It's only been 3 weeks. That's a long time when you're 4. It's a long time when you're 32, too." Emma gave him a curious look. "Do you miss Miss Nora?" The question was too perceptive, too knowing. When had his daughter become so observant? "I think she's interesting," Ethan said carefully. "That's what you said about the museum last month, and that was boring." "The Natural History Museum is not boring. The dinosaurs were cool. Everything else was boring." Emma flopped back on her pillows. "I think you like her. Like her. But where did you learn that phrase?" "Kayla at school."
Her mom is dating someone, and Kayla says she likes him. Ethan sat on the edge of Emma's bed, trying to figure out how to have this conversation with a 5-year-old. Would it bother you if I liked Miss Nora? Emma considered this seriously. Is she nice to you? Very nice. Does she make you smile? Yes. Then I think it's okay. She paused. As long as she's nice to me, too. She's very nice to you. Then it's definitely okay. Emma yawned. Can we bring Mia a present for the library opening? What kind of present? I don't know. Something special. They spent the next half hour browsing online for age-appropriate gifts before Emma settled on a set of fairy tale books with beautiful illustrations. Ethan paid extra for overnight shipping, ignoring the voice in his head that said he was trying too hard. Friday morning came with rain, heavy, relentless sheets of it that turned the highway into a dangerous crawl. What should have been a 3-hour drive took nearly 5. Emma entertained herself with a tablet while Ethan white-knuckled the steering wheel and tried not to think about the messages piling up on his phone. They stopped for a late lunch at a diner off the highway. Emma ordered pancakes even though it was 2 in the afternoon, and Ethan didn't have the heart to argue. You're nervous, she observed. I'm not nervous. You're doing the jaw thing again. Ethan consciously relaxed his face. How do you know about the jaw thing? Aunt Becca told me. She says you do it when you're stressed or nervous or lying. Remind me to have a conversation with your aunt about sharing too much information. Emma grinned and went back to her pancakes. 20 minutes later, they were back on the road, the rain finally letting up as they crossed into Pennsylvania. The farmhouse was exactly as Ethan remembered, slightly shabby, completely charming, and blessedly empty. Helen Patterson, the neighbor, had left a key under the mat and a note saying she'd stocked the fridge with basics. Emma immediately claimed her room from last time and started unpacking with determined efficiency. Ethan checked his phone, saw 17 missed calls and 43 unread emails, and made the conscious decision to ignore all of it. Tomorrow was about the library, about seeing Nora again, about keeping a promise to his daughter and maybe to himself. His phone rang. This time it was Nora. You made it? She asked. About an hour ago. Traffic was terrible. The rain. It's been bad all day. A pause. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I said I would. People say a lot of things. There was weight in those words. History that Ethan didn't know but could feel. I keep my promises, he said quietly. We'll see. But she didn't sound angry, just careful. The opening starts at 10 tomorrow, but if you wanted to come earlier, there's a lot to set up, and extra hands would be helpful. How early? 8? We'll be there. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the farmhouse kitchen, looking out at the fields beyond. The rain had stopped, leaving everything green and fresh. Emma's laughter floated down from upstairs. She'd found something funny on her tablet. This felt right in a way his life in Manhattan never had, and that terrified him more than any business negotiation ever could. Morning came bright and clear, the storm washed away like it had never existed. Emma was up before 6, too excited to sleep. They had breakfast, got dressed, and arrived at the library at 7:55. The parking lot was already half full. Volunteers were unloading boxes from trucks, carrying folding chairs, stringing up banners. Someone had brought coffee and donuts, and there was an atmosphere of cheerful chaos that reminded Ethan of the startup world, everyone working toward something bigger than themselves. He found Nora inside, directing traffic with quiet authority. She wore jeans and a library t-shirt someone had clearly made for the occasion, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. When she saw him, her face did something complicated. Surprise, pleasure, worry, all at once. You're early, she said. You said 8. I said 8 knowing most people would show up at 8:30, but she was smiling. Come on, I'll put you to work. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Ethan found himself assembling chairs, hanging decorations, and at one point being ordered by a 70-year-old volunteer named Margaret to climb a ladder and fix a crooked banner. Higher on the left, Margaret called up. No, your other left. There. Perfect. Emma and Mia had found each other immediately and were now helping by rearranging books in the new children's section, which mostly meant pulling them off shelves and making piles on the floor, but no one seemed to mind.
By 9:30, everything was ready. The children's section looked incredible, bright and welcoming, with the wooden castle at its center and new shelves lining the walls. Someone had painted a mural of a forest on one wall, complete with hidden animals that kids could search for. "It's beautiful," Ethan said to Nora. She was staring at the room with an expression he couldn't quite read. "It's everything I hoped it would be. You did this. A lot of people did this. But you made it happen." Nora looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them. Recognition of effort, of care, of the kind of quiet determination that changed things without fanfare. The moment broke when the mayor arrived, followed by what seemed like half the town. Families poured in, kids immediately making a beeline for the castle. There were speeches, the mayor, the library board president, someone from the historical society. Nora spoke last, her voice shaking slightly but her words clear. "This library saved my life when I was young," she said. "It gave me a place to belong when I didn't belong anywhere else. And I hope it can be that place for the next generation of kids who need it." The applause was thunderous. Ethan watched her step down from the small podium, watched kids swarm her with questions and hugs, watched her glow with pride and exhaustion. This was her moment, her victory. And he was just grateful to witness it. The morning passed in a joyful blur. Emma and Mia gave tours of the castle to anyone who'd listen. The local bakery had donated cookies. Someone started a story circle, reading picture books to an audience of entranced children and nostalgic adults. Around noon, Ethan found Nora sitting on a bench in the main hall, finally still for the first time all day. "You okay?" he asked. "Overwhelmed, happy, terrified this is all a dream, and I'll wake up." She laughed. "The usual." "It's not a dream." "No?" She gestured around at the crowded library, the sound of children laughing, the sight of the community coming together. "Because 3 months ago, we were talking about closing this section permanently, and now look at it. Sometimes things work out. Do they? In my experience, things usually fall apart right when you start believing they might be okay." There was something raw in her voice, and Ethan wanted to ask what had happened to make her so certain of disappointment. But before he could, Emma came running over. "Daddy, Mia and I want to check out books. Can we get library cards?" "I don't live here, remember?" "But Miss Nora said visitors can get temporary cards." Emma was already pulling him toward the circulation desk. 20 minutes later, both girls had library cards and a stack of books each. They settled into the castle to read, or more accurately, to flip through pages and make up stories based on the pictures. Nora and Ethan ended up back on the bench, watching them. "Thank you for coming," Nora said quietly. "It means a lot. To Mia. She's been talking about Emma nonstop for 3 weeks. Emma's been the same way. They're good for each other." "Yeah." Ethan paused. "What about us?" Nora turned to look at him. "What about us? Are we good for each other?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. We're very different people, Ethan." "That's not always a bad thing, isn't it? You live in a world I don't understand. Corporate acquisitions and quarterly reports and—" She gestured at his watch, which probably cost more than her monthly rent. "All of that. And you live in a world that actually matters. Books and kids and community. Don't romanticize it. This world is hard. It's constantly struggling for funding and fighting to stay relevant, and I know. But you love it anyway. That's the difference between us. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not sure I love it. You love this even though it's hard." Nora was quiet. Around them, the library continued its celebration, but in their small bubble on the bench, everything felt suspended. "My ex-husband was like you," she said finally. "Successful, driven, always chasing the next big thing. When I got pregnant with Mia, he was furious, said a kid would derail his plans. He gave me a choice, him or the baby. That's not a choice. No, but I made it anyway. Chose Mia, chose to be a single mother in a town where everyone knew my business. And he left, signed away his rights and disappeared." She looked down at her hands. "For 4 years, it's been fine. We've been fine. But then a few months ago, he came back, said he'd changed, that he wanted to be a father, that he'd made a mistake." Ethan felt ice forming in his stomach. "What did you say?" "I told him to leave, that he'd made his choice, and now I was making mine, and he left. But Not before saying he'd fight for custody if I didn't let him back into Mia's life.
He can't do that, can he? I don't know. Legally, maybe. He has money now, a stable life in Chicago, and I have, she gestured vaguely, part-time work and an old car and a rented house. That doesn't make you less of a mother. Try telling that to a judge. The pieces were clicking into place now. The exhaustion Ethan had seen in her from the beginning. The careful boundaries. The fear that anyone getting close would eventually leave. When? He asked. When did he say he'd file? He didn't specify, just that he would. His lawyer sent a letter last week saying they were exploring options. You need a lawyer. I can't afford Nora. Ethan turned to face her fully. Let me help. No. Why not? Because I don't need saving, Ethan. I need... She stopped, frustrated. I don't know what I need, but it's not money. I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to help someone I care about who's in trouble. You barely know me. That doesn't seem to matter. They stared at each other, the conversation veering into territory neither had expected. Around them, the library celebration continued, oblivious. I can't take your money, Nora said finally. I won't. If I can't fight this on my own, pride is expensive. So is dignity, and I won't lose mine just because I'm scared. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that accepting help wasn't weakness, that she didn't have to do everything alone, but he could see in her face that pushing would only drive her further away. Okay, he said, no money, but at least talk to a lawyer, get advice. You need to know what you're up against. I will, I need time to figure it out. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion erupted near the children's section. Raised voices, someone calling for Nora. They both jumped up and rushed over to find Mia on the floor, crying, Emma kneeling beside her looking terrified. What happened? Nora dropped to her knees. We were playing in the castle and she fell, Emma said, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... It's okay, sweetheart, accidents happen. Nora was checking Mia over with practiced efficiency. Where does it hurt, baby? My arm, Mia was sobbing. Mommy, it hurts. Nora's face went white. Mia's left arm was hanging at an odd angle, and when she tried to move it, she screamed. We need to get her to the hospital, Ethan said. I don't have a car seat, Nora said, her voice tight with panic. I walked here this morning because it's so close, and I didn't think... My car, come on. He scooped Mia up carefully while Nora grabbed her purse, moving on autopilot. Emma was crying now too, and an older woman, Margaret from earlier, immediately took charge. I'll keep Emma here, she said firmly. You go. We'll take care of her. Daddy? It's okay, Em. Stay here. I'll call you as soon as I know anything. They rushed out to the parking lot, Ethan cradling Mia while Nora fumbled with the car seat they'd transferred from her vehicle that morning, just in case. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't get the buckles right. Let me, Ethan said gently. He got Mia secured while Nora climbed in back beside her, holding her good hand and whispering reassurances. Mia's sobs had quieted to whimpers, which somehow seemed worse. The drive to the regional hospital took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Nora called ahead, giving information to someone on the other end in a voice that was impressively calm, given how her hands were still trembling. At the emergency room, everything became a blur of nurses and questions and paperwork. Nora had insurance, barely, but there was talk of copays and deductibles and whether this was the right facility or if they should transfer to the bigger hospital 40 minutes away. We're staying here, Ethan said firmly. Whatever she needs, we're getting it here. The nurse gave him an odd look. Are you the father? No, I'm... He looked at Nora, who looked back at him with an expression he couldn't read. I'm a friend. Only immediate family can... Then I'll wait. But she's getting whatever treatment she needs. Now. Something in his voice made the nurse back down. Let me get the doctor. They took Mia back for x-rays, Nora going with her. Ethan was left in the waiting room surrounded by plastic chairs and old magazines and the particular smell of antiseptic that all hospitals seemed to share. He pulled out his phone and called Emma. Is Mia okay? She asked immediately. They're taking pictures of her arm right now. She's going to be fine. It's my fault. No, sweetheart, it's not. Accidents happen. But we were playing too rough, and I should have. Emma. Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. It's not your fault. Do you understand me? These things happen. She sniffled. Okay. I'll call you when I know more. Be good for Mrs. Margaret. I will. Tell Mia I'm sorry. I will. He hung up and sat back down, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. The library opening was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning. And now, Nora emerged through the double doors, and Ethan stood immediately. Broken, she said, her voice hollow. Clean break, they said. She'll need a cast. Maybe surgery if it doesn't set right. Okay, that's manageable. Do you know how much a broken arm costs without good insurance? Nora's laugh was bitter. Because I'm about to find out. Nora, don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. She sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs, and Ethan sat beside her. They waited in silence while doctors did whatever doctors did, while Mia got a cast, while insurance companies and billing departments decided how much this accident would cost. When they finally brought Mia back out, she was subdued but no longer crying. Her left arm was in a bright purple cast, and she was clutching a stuffed bear that some kind nurse had given her. 3 months, the doctor told Nora. Keep it dry, watch for swelling or discoloration. Come back in 6 weeks for a checkup. The nurse will give you follow-up instructions. Nora nodded, taking in information, her face carefully blank. They drove back to the library in silence. The celebration had wrapped up. Margaret had apparently marshaled everyone to clean and lock up. Emma was waiting on the front steps with her, jumping up when she saw the car. I'm so sorry, she said to Mia through the window. Mia held up her cast. I have purple now. Does it hurt? A little, but the doctor gave me medicine. Just like that, they were okay. Kids, Ethan thought, had a remarkable capacity for forgiveness. Margaret refused to leave until she was sure everyone was settled. She followed them back to Nora's house, a small rental on the edge of town, and helped get Mia inside and comfortable. You call if you need anything, she told Nora firmly, and I mean anything. My number's on your fridge. When she finally left, Nora sank onto the couch beside her sleeping daughter and just stared at nothing. Ethan and Emma stood awkwardly in the doorway, not sure if they should stay or go. Thank you, Nora said finally, for driving us. For staying. Of course. You can go now. I know you probably have somewhere to be. It was a dismissal, gentle but clear. Nora, please, Ethan, I need to be alone right now. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, we should go. They left, Ethan looking back at the closed door, feeling like he'd failed some test he hadn't known he was taking. Back at the farmhouse, Emma was quiet over dinner. Finally, she said, Miss Nora's sad. She's worried about Mia. No, yes, but she's sad about other stuff too. What makes you say that? Emma shrugged. I can tell. She looks like you do sometimes, when you think I'm not paying attention. Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought, his 5-year-old daughter somehow seeing what he tried so hard to hide. People are complicated, he said finally. I know, but they don't have to be sad all the time, right? No, they don't. Then maybe we can help her not be sad. If only it were that simple. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Nora's face in the hospital, about the pride that wouldn't let her accept help, about the ex-husband threatening custody and the broken arm that would cost money she didn't have. Around midnight, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood went cold. It was a photo. Nora and Mia, clearly taken earlier that day at the library. And below it a message. Nice seeing my daughter at a public event. Looks like she's doing well. My lawyer will be in touch. Ethan stared at the screen, fury building in his chest. This was the ex, had to be, watching, waiting, using today against her somehow. He started to call Nora, then stopped. She'd made it clear she needed space, but this changed things. He made a different call instead. His lawyer, who answered on the third ring despite the late hour. Ethan? What's wrong? I need you to find me the best family law attorney in Pennsylvania, someone who specializes in custody cases.
And I need it tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday. I don't care. Find someone. Money is no object. There was a pause. What's going on? Someone I care about is in trouble, and I'm not going to let her face it alone, whether she wants my help or not. He hung up and sat in the dark farmhouse, making plans. Nora could keep her pride. She could refuse his money, but she couldn't stop him from making sure she had the resources to fight, even if she never knew they came from him. By Sunday afternoon, Ethan had 3 names. Top-tier family law attorneys, all within driving distance of Riverton, all willing to take a consultation on short notice if the retainer was right. He'd also had his lawyer pull every public record available on Nora's ex-husband, whose name, it turned out, was Derek Wells. The file made for ugly reading. Derek had indeed done well for himself in Chicago, working his way up to regional sales director at a pharmaceutical company. Married now to someone named Jessica. No other children. And according to the private investigator Ethan had hired, because of course he'd hired one, Derek had been making inquiries about custody law for the past 2 months. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was calculated. "What do you want to do with this information?" his lawyer asked over the phone. "Nothing yet. Just keep digging. I want to know everything about this guy. Finances, character witnesses, anything that might be useful in court." "Ethan, you know this isn't your fight, right?" "I know." "Do you? Because you're spending a lot of money on someone else's custody battle." "Just do what I'm paying you to do." He hung up before the lecture could continue. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day, even though they had nowhere to be. "Can we visit Mia?" she asked. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not? She's probably bored, and I want to sign her cast." Ethan thought about Nora's request for space, about the delicate boundary he was already crossing just by investigating her ex. Showing up uninvited would probably push her further away, but Emma was giving him that look, the one that said she'd already decided and was just waiting for him to catch up. "Let me text Miss Nora first," he said. The response came faster than he expected. "Mia would love that. Come around too?" They stopped at a store and bought fancy markers specifically designed for signing casts, along with a coloring book and a stuffed unicorn that Emma insisted Mia would love. Ethan tried not to think about how he was using his daughter as an excuse to see Nora again. Nora's house looked different in daylight, smaller, more worn than he'd realized last night. The siding needed paint, the porch sagged slightly on one side, and the front yard was more weeds than grass. But there were flower boxes in the windows, bright with petunias, and a small vegetable garden along the fence that showed someone cared about this place even if they couldn't afford to fix it. Mia answered the door, her cast already decorated with what looked like her own attempts at drawing flowers. "Emma, look what I have!" She held up the purple cast proudly. "That's so cool! Does it hurt?" "Only a little. Want to see my room?" The girls disappeared upstairs, leaving Ethan standing in the doorway with his bag of gifts. Nora appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Sorry, I was making lunch. Or trying to. Cooking one-handed with a 4-year-old underfoot is harder than it looks. I brought markers for the cast." That was thoughtful. She stood there, neither inviting him in nor asking him to leave. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in. I should at least offer you coffee after yesterday." The inside of the house was clean but sparse. Mismatched furniture that had clearly been acquired piece by piece from thrift stores and yard sales. The kind of place where everything was functional, but nothing matched. But there were books everywhere, overflowing from shelves, stacked on tables, tucked into corners. And pictures on the walls, mostly of Mia at various ages, along with some hand-drawn artwork that had been carefully framed. Ethan followed Nora to the kitchen, which was barely big enough for both of them. She poured coffee into mugs that didn't match, and they stood there in awkward silence. "How is she really?" Ethan asked finally. "Handling it better than I am." Nora's smile was strained. "The doctor prescribed pain medication, but it makes her loopy, so I'm trying to use it sparingly. She didn't sleep well last night." "Neither did you, I'm guessing." "Is it that obvious?" It was. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. But Ethan knew better than to say that. "You've had a rough 24 hours. That's one way to put it. She took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down like she'd forgotten why she was holding it. "The hospital bill came this morning. Even with insurance, it's—" She stopped, shook her head. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my financial problems. What if I want to hear about them? Why would you want that? Because I care about you, Ethan thought. Because watching you struggle is harder than any business problem I've ever faced. Because I'm already in too deep and I don't know how to stop. Because we're friends, he said instead. Nora looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Are we? Friends? Aren't we? I don't know what we are, Ethan. You show up here, you help with things, you're kind to my daughter, but you live 3 hours away and we barely know each other. And she stopped, frustrated. I don't know what you want from me. I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something. There was bitterness in those words, experience that had taught her to question generosity. Ethan thought about Derek, about the files sitting in his email, about all the ways someone could hurt another person just by leaving. Not everyone, he said quietly. Nora looked like she wanted to argue, but footsteps thundered down the stairs. Both girls appeared, breathless and giggling. Can we have a snack? Mia asked. Please, Emma added. Nora pulled out apple slices and peanut butter, and the girls settled at the small kitchen table. Ethan found himself squeezed against the counter, close enough to Nora that he could smell her shampoo. Something simple and clean that reminded him of the library. I got a call this morning, Nora said quietly, while the girls were distracted. From Derek's lawyer. They're filing for joint custody. Hearings in 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Ethan's mind immediately went into strategy mode. That was fast. Too fast for standard proceedings. Derek must have been working on this longer than they thought. Do you have representation? I can't afford. That's not what I asked. Nora's jaw tightened. No, I don't. I called legal aid, but they have a wait list. And the lawyers in town, the ones who'd take a case like this, they want retainers I can't pay. What about the library? Do they have employee assistance programs? I'm part-time. No benefits. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Ethan heard the defeat underneath. There has to be someone. There isn't. I've looked. I've called. I've begged. Nora's voice was carefully controlled, but her hands were shaking. And the worst part is Derek knows this. His lawyer all but said so on the call. They're counting on me not being able to fight back. That's not how the legal system works. Isn't it? When one side has money and the other side has nothing? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You live in a different world, Ethan. In your world, problems get solved because you can afford to solve them. In mine, they just pile up until you drown. She wasn't wrong, and Ethan hated that she wasn't wrong. Let me, he started. No. Nora cut him off firmly. I know what you're going to say, and the answer is no. I won't take money from you. Why not? Because then what? You pay for a lawyer, you help me win, and then what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to face you knowing I only kept my daughter because you bought me justice? That's not how I'd see it. But it's how I'd see it. And I have to live with myself, Ethan. I have to be able to look Mia in the eye and know I did this on my own. Pride, Ethan thought. The most expensive luxury anyone could afford. What if it's not about pride? He said carefully. What if it's about Mia having her mother? Because that's what matters here, right? Not how you win. Just that you win. Nora looked at him, and for a moment her careful walls cracked. He saw the fear underneath, raw and real. You don't understand, she said. My whole life people have wanted to fix me. Foster families who took me in and tried to change who I was. Social workers who thought they knew better. Derek, who wanted me to be someone I wasn't. And I'm so tired of being someone's project. Foster families. The detail landed like a punch. Suddenly all those careful references to her childhood made sense. The library as a safe haven. The mother who wasn't well. The father who'd left. You were in foster care, Ethan said quietly. From age 12 on. 6 different homes in 4 years. Nora's voice was flat, reciting facts. My mom couldn't take care of me. Mental illness, they said. Depression, anxiety, maybe more. And there was no one else. So I got shuffled around until I aged out at 18. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived. But it taught me something important. I can only count on myself. The minute you start depending on other people, they leave. Or they change their minds. Or they decide you're too much trouble. Not everyone. Yes, everyone. Eventually. She pulled herself together, straightening her shoulders. So thank you for the offer, really, but I'll figure this out on my own. Before Ethan could respond, Emma called out from the living room. Daddy, can we show Miss Nora what we brought? They went into the other room, where Emma was proudly displaying the cast-signing markers and the unicorn. Mia's face lit up when she saw them.
For me? For you, Emma confirmed. The unicorn's name is Sparkle. I picked her out myself. Mia hugged the stuffed animal fiercely with her good arm, and Nora's expression did something complicated. Gratitude and sadness, and something that might have been grief for all the things her daughter didn't have. Thank you, she said to Emma. That was very kind. You're welcome.
Can I sign your cast now? The girls settled on the floor with the markers while Ethan and Nora watched from the couch. They weren't touching, but Ethan was hyper-aware of the distance between them, 6 inches that felt like a canyon. She's a good kid, Nora said. Emma, you've done well with her. Most of that is in spite of me, not because of me. I doubt that. You'd be surprised. I work too much, I'm not around enough, and half the time I don't know if I'm doing this parenting thing right. Join the club. Nora smiled, and for the first time that day, it reached her eyes. I spent Mia's first year convinced I was ruining her. Every decision felt wrong. Every cry felt like proof I had no idea what I was doing. What changed? I realized that feeling like you're messing up is probably a sign you actually care. The people who are bad parents don't worry about it. It was such a simple observation, but it landed with unexpected weight. Ethan thought about all his anxieties around Emma. Was he present enough? Was he teaching her the right values? Was his own damage affecting her development? Maybe Nora was right. Maybe the worry itself meant something. Emma finished signing the cast with elaborate flowers and her name in careful block letters. Then she announced that she and Mia were going to play upstairs, and the girls disappeared again in a thundering of footsteps. Alone in the living room, the silence felt heavier. I should probably get going, Ethan said, though he didn't move to stand. Probably, Nora agreed, but she didn't move either. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why did you call last night after the hospital? You could have just taken an Uber home, but you called me. Nora was quiet for a moment. I don't know. In the moment, you were just there, and I was scared, and I wasn't thinking clearly. Was that the only reason? What other reason would there be? Maybe because on some level you trust me, even if you don't want to. Nora looked at him, and something passed between them, a recognition of the thing neither was ready to name. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, she said softly. Ethan's phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. You should get that, Nora said. He pulled it out reluctantly. Marcus, calling for the 3rd time. With a sigh, Ethan stood and stepped into the kitchen. This better be important. The Singapore office is threatening to quit, all of them. They want a 30% raise across the board or they're walking. That's ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous, but they're serious. And if they leave, we lose the entire Asian market presence we've spent 2 years building. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. What's the actual issue? They feel undervalued. The Tokyo expansion got bigger bonuses, and now Singapore wants parity. So give them parity. Ethan, that's millions of dollars. I'm aware of the math, Marcus. I'm asking if it's worth it to keep them. Yes, but then do it. Send me the paperwork. I'll approve it. You're not even going to negotiate? Why? They have leverage, they know their worth, and losing them would cost more than giving them what they're asking for. Pay them. He hung up and found Nora standing in the doorway, watching. Problems? She asked. Just work. Nothing I can't handle. He pocketed his phone. That's the thing about running a company. The fires never stop. Do you like it? The fires, I mean. The constant crisis management. It was the same question she'd asked before, and Ethan still didn't have a good answer. I'm good at it. That's not what I asked. No, it's not. He leaned against the counter. Honestly, sometimes I think I built this company just to prove I could. Prove that the kid who got sent to boarding school at 8 because his parents didn't want to deal with him could be successful. And now I have more money than I know what to do with, and a job that never stops demanding more. And I'm not sure what the point of any of it is. The admission surprised him. He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even known he felt it until the words were out. Nora was watching him with that careful, assessing look. What would you do instead, if you could? I don't know. I've never let myself think about it. Maybe you should. Before he could respond, Emma came downstairs again. Mia's getting sleepy. She says the medicine makes her tired. Ethan checked his watch. They'd been here almost 2 hours. We should let you rest, he said to Nora. She walked them to the door, Mia trailing behind, clutching her unicorn. The little girl hugged Emma fiercely with her good arm. Come back soon, she said. I will. I promise. At the car, Emma climbed into her seat while Ethan stood by the driver's door, looking back at the house. Nora was watching from the porch, arms crossed against the cooling afternoon air. He wanted to say something that would make this easier, that would bridge the distance between them, but all the words felt inadequate. Nora gave a small wave, then went inside. The door closed and Ethan stood there for another moment before getting in the car. Are we going to help Miss Nora? Emma asked as they pulled away. What do you mean? With the bad man who wants to take Mia away. Are we going to help? Out of the mouths of babes again. I don't know if she'll let us, sweetheart. That's dumb. If someone needs help, you help them. That's what you always tell me. Adults are more complicated than that. Adults are weird, Emma declared. Ethan couldn't argue with that. That night, after Emma was asleep, he sat on the farmhouse porch with his laptop and made phone calls. First to his lawyer, confirming the 3 attorneys he'd identified. Then to his investigator, asking for more detail on Derek Wells. Employment history, references, anything that might be useful. What's the endgame here? The investigator asked. I want to know if he's serious about this custody thing or if he's just trying to pressure her into something. And if he's serious, then I want ammunition. The investigator was quiet for a moment. You know this could get messy, right? If it goes to court and it comes out that you've been investigating the plaintiff, that could complicate things. I'm not planning to use it directly. I just want to know what we're dealing with. We? Ethan ignored the question and hung up. Then he opened his email and drafted a message to the first attorney on his list. Not hiring them directly, that would be too obvious, and Nora would know immediately. But perhaps there was another way. He composed and deleted 3 different versions before settling on something simple. A consultation, he explained, for a friend who needed representation but couldn't afford it. Pro bono or low cost or some kind of payment plan. Was there any way to help? The response came within an hour. The attorney, Sarah Chen, based in Pittsburgh but willing to travel, said she occasionally took cases on a sliding scale basis. If the client qualified, she'd consider it. Ethan wrote back immediately. The client definitely qualified. Could they set up a consultation? The next morning, he had a time scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Now he just needed to convince Nora to go. He called her around 9 after Emma had settled in with cartoons. Hey, Nora said when she picked up. She sounded tired. Everything okay? I found something. A lawyer who does sliding scale rates for custody cases. I know you said you didn't want help, but just hear me out. Ethan. She's based in Pittsburgh, but she travels. She's one of the best in the state. And before you say no, just talk to her. A consultation is free. You don't have to commit to anything. Silence on the other end. Then, how did you find her? I have resources. Let me use them for something that matters. This isn't your problem to solve. I know it's not, but let me help anyway. More silence. Ethan could hear Mia in the background asking for something. I have to go, Nora said finally. Mia needs her medicine. Tuesday at 2. I'll text you the address. Just think about it. Ethan, just think about it, please. He hung up before she could say no, then immediately texted her the attorney's information. Whether she showed up was her choice, but at least now she had the option. Emma appeared in the doorway. Are we going home today? Tomorrow morning. I have meetings Tuesday I can't miss. Can we come back next weekend? Ethan thought about his calendar, already packed with obligations, about the Singapore situation and the quarterly reports due and the 100 other things demanding his attention. I don't know, Em. That means no. That means maybe. She gave him a look that said she saw right through him, then went back to her cartoons. Ethan sat there with his phone, staring at Nora's contact information. They'd known each other for what, 3 weeks? And somehow she'd become the most important person in his life besides Emma. It was irrational. It was impractical. It was probably a disaster waiting to happen. But he couldn't walk away. Monday morning, they packed up and headed back to the city. Emma cried when they left, and Ethan felt the same tightness in his chest, like he was leaving something important behind. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Traffic was terrible. Emma was moody, and Ethan's phone never stopped buzzing with work crises that apparently couldn't wait. By the time they got home, he was exhausted. Emma went straight to her room without being asked, and Ethan stood in his pristine apartment feeling like a stranger in his own life. His phone rang. Nora. "I went," she said without preamble, "to see the lawyer." Ethan's heart jumped. And she's taking my case, this sliding scale, like you said. I don't know how you found her, and I don't want to know, but thank you. You don't have to thank me. I do. Because you're right. This isn't about my pride. It's about Mia. Her voice cracked slightly. She told me things. The lawyer. About Derek's case. About what he's claiming. What's he claiming? That I'm unstable. That I can't provide a stable home. That Mia would be better off with him and his new wife. Nora took a shaky breath. He's using everything against me. The broken arm, the part-time job, the rental house. He's making it sound like I'm neglecting her. That's not true. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if a judge believes it. Sarah's good. She'll fight this. I hope so, because I can't... Nora stopped. I can't lose her, Ethan. She's everything. You won't, I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. She laughed, but it was watery. You're very certain about things. It's a character flaw. Or a strength. They were quiet for a moment, the phone line carrying the sound of their breathing. I should go, Nora said. Mia's asking for dinner. Okay, but Nora? Yeah? You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Another silence. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. Thank you. She hung up, and Ethan stood there in his empty apartment, holding a phone and a promise he had no idea how to keep. But he'd figure it out, because walking away wasn't an option anymore. Not when everything that mattered was 3 hours away in a small town he'd barely known existed a month ago. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Sarah Chen was as good as her reputation suggested, thorough, strategic, and utterly unintimidated by Derek's expensive Chicago legal team. She filed motions, gathered evidence, and prepared Nora for every possible angle of attack. Ethan stayed involved from a distance, checking in with Sarah regularly, but never letting Nora know the extent of his involvement. He'd arranged for character witnesses, compiled evidence of Nora's devotion to Mia, and had his investigator dig up every piece of information about Derek that might be useful. What they found wasn't pretty. Derek had a history of job hopping, complaints from coworkers about his temper, and a DUI from 2 years ago that somehow hadn't made it into his initial filing. It was exactly the kind of ammunition Sarah needed, but using it meant exposing how deep Ethan's involvement ran, and he wasn't ready for that conversation with Nora yet. The custody hearing was set for a Thursday morning in county court. Ethan cleared his entire schedule, ignoring Marcus's protests about the board meeting he was missing. Tell them something came up, he said. They're going to want specifics. Then tell them I'm handling a personal matter and they'll have to manage without me for 1 day. He drove to Pennsylvania Wednesday night, checked into a hotel near the courthouse, and lay awake until 3 a.m. running through every possible scenario. When his alarm went off at 6, Ethan felt like he'd been hit by a truck. But he got up, put on his best suit, the one he wore for the most important negotiations, and drove to the courthouse. Sarah had told him not to come, that his presence might raise questions, but Ethan didn't care about questions. He cared about being there, about Nora knowing she wasn't alone, even if she never understood why. The courthouse was a gray concrete building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Ethan found a seat in the back of the courtroom just as proceedings were starting. Nora sat at the plaintiff's table with Sarah, her posture rigid. She wore what was probably her best outfit, a simple dress that had seen too many wears, her hair pulled back severely. She looked terrified. Derek sat across the aisle with his lawyer and his wife. He was exactly what Ethan had expected: polished, confident, the kind of man who'd learned to weaponize his charm. His wife looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't entirely sure how she'd ended up in a custody battle over someone else's child. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the filings quickly, then looked up. "This is a petition for joint custody," she said. "Mr. Wells, you're seeking to overturn the original custody arrangement where you willingly relinquished all parental rights. Is that correct?" Derek's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client was young and overwhelmed when he made that decision. He's since matured, established a stable career and home life, and believes he can now provide for his daughter in ways he couldn't before." "And Ms. Wells, you're opposing this petition. Why?" Sarah stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Wells has had zero contact with his daughter for 4 years. He abandoned his family, signed away his rights without coercion, and is now attempting to re-enter this child's life purely because it's convenient for him. My client has been the sole caretaker, provider, and parent to Mia Wells since birth. Disrupting that bond would be harmful to the child." The judge looked between them. "I've read both filings. Let's hear testimony. Mr. Wells, you first." What followed was excruciating. Derek took the stand and painted himself as a reformed man who'd made mistakes but was ready to be a father. He talked about his stable job, his house in a good school district, his wife's willingness to help raise Mia. Then he started in on Nora, the part-time job that barely paid, the rental house in a town with limited opportunities, the recent hospital visit that suggested negligent supervision. "I love my daughter," Derek said, his voice catching perfectly. "And I want what's best for her. I'm not trying to take her away from her mother. I'm just trying to give her a better life than she has now." It was a masterful performance. Even knowing it was mostly lies, Ethan found himself impressed by the delivery. Then it was Nora's turn. She took the stand looking small and scared, and Ethan's heart clenched. Sarah walked her through the basics: her job at the library, her care for Mia, the life they'd built together. "Ms. Wells," Sarah said, "can you describe your relationship with your daughter?" Nora's voice was quiet but steady. "Mia is everything to me. She's the reason I wake up in the morning, the reason I work as hard as I do, the reason I came back to this town instead of running away from everything that hurt." "And when Mr. Wells left, how did you manage?" "I managed because I had to, because there was a baby who needed me and no one else was going to step up. So I worked. I saved. I built a life for us. Is it a perfect life? No, but it's ours. And it's built on love, not money or convenience." Derek's lawyer jumped up for cross-examination. "Ms. Wells, isn't it true that you can barely afford your current living situation?" "I manage." "Isn't it true that you work part-time because you can't find full-time employment?" "I work part-time because the library was closed for renovations. I'll be full-time again soon." "And isn't it true that just 3 weeks ago, your daughter broke her arm under your supervision?" Nora's face went white. "It was an accident. An accident that resulted in a hospital visit and significant medical bills you can't afford? Kids have accidents. That doesn't make me a bad mother. But it does suggest you might not be able to provide the level of care a 4-year-old needs." "Objection." Sarah was on her feet. "Counsel is badgering the witness." "Sustained," the judge said. "Move on, counselor." But the damage was done. Ethan could see it in Nora's face, in the way her shoulders had curved inward. The lawyer pressed on, asking about finances, about Nora's own childhood in foster care, about whether she'd been to therapy to deal with her obvious trauma. Each question was designed to make her look unstable, incapable, broken. By the time she stepped down, Nora looked like she'd been through a war. Sarah called character witnesses, the library director who spoke about Nora's dedication, Margaret from the library opening who testified about her involvement in the community, even Emma's friend's mother who'd met Nora once and had nothing but good things to say. But Derek's lawyer had witnesses too. A coworker who'd heard Nora complain about being exhausted, a neighbor who'd seen Mia playing alone in the yard. Small things, twisted to look like neglect. The hearing stretched into the afternoon. The judge called a brief recess, and Ethan slipped out before Nora could see him. In the hallway, he found Sarah. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Honestly, I don't know. The judge is hard to read. Derek's team did a good job making Nora look unstable, but our character witnesses helped. It could go either way. What about the DUI? The job history? We brought it up. His lawyer explained it away as youthful mistakes. Without more concrete evidence of current instability, it's just mudslinging. What if there was more evidence? Sarah looked at him sharply. What kind of evidence? Employment complaints? A pattern of aggressive behavior? Maybe even some questionable financial dealings. Do you have this evidence? I could have it by tomorrow. Ethan, Sarah's voice was warning, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. If it comes out that you've been investigating the other side, it could compromise the case. What if it doesn't come from me? It doesn't matter where it comes from if it can be traced back to you. Ethan thought about that, about Nora's face on the stand, about Mia, who didn't understand why a stranger was trying to take her away from the only parent she'd ever known. I'll be careful, he said. Ethan, but he was already walking away, pulling out his phone, calling his investigator. I need everything you have on Derek Wells, he said. Every complaint, every disciplinary action, every questionable decision, and I need it delivered to Sarah Chen's office tonight in a way that can't be traced back to me. That's going to be tricky. That's why I pay you obscene amounts of money. Make it happen. He hung up and went back inside. The hearing resumed, more testimony, more arguments. Finally, around 4 p.m, the judge called for closing statements. Sarah stood. Your Honor, this case is simple. A man who abandoned his daughter is trying to rewrite history. He signed away his rights. He walked away. And now, years later, he wants back in. Not because he loves Mia, he doesn't even know her, but because it suits his current life narrative. Meanwhile, my client has been there every single day. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every milestone. She's not perfect, but she's present, and that's what matters. Derek's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client made a mistake. He admits that. But people change. They grow. And Mr. Wells has grown into a man capable of providing stability, opportunity, and a two-parent household. Ms. Wells tries hard, but trying isn't enough. Children need more than love. They need security. And my client can provide that in ways Ms. Wells simply cannot. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at both sides. I'll have my decision within 48 hours, she said. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and Ethan watched Nora collapse into Sarah's arms, all her careful composure finally breaking. He wanted to go to her, to tell her it would be okay, to promise that he'd fix this no matter what it took. But he couldn't, because she still didn't know the extent of his involvement, and if she found out now, in this fragile moment, it might break whatever trust they'd built. So Ethan slipped out of the courthouse and drove back to his hotel, alone, carrying the weight of a promise he still didn't know how to keep. The next 48 hours crawled by like months. Ethan stayed in Pennsylvania, making excuses to Marcus about needing to be on site for due diligence on a potential acquisition. It wasn't entirely a lie. There was always some deal that could use his attention. But the truth was, he couldn't bring himself to leave. Not when Nora was waiting for a decision that would determine her entire future. He didn't call her. Didn't text. Sarah had made it clear that keeping distance was important, that any appearance of outside influence could complicate things if Derek's team started digging. So Ethan sat in his hotel room, refreshing his email every 10 minutes, waiting for news that refused to come. Emma called on Friday evening, video chatting from Rebecca's apartment where she'd gone to stay for a few days. When are you coming home? She asked. Soon, sweetheart. I have some things to finish up here. Is Miss Nora okay? How did she always know? She's waiting to hear about something important. We'll know more soon. Is it about Mia? Ethan hesitated, then decided his daughter deserved honesty. Yes. Remember how we talked about Mia's father wanting to be part of her life again? The bad man. He's not necessarily bad, Em. He's just complicated. And there's a judge who has to decide what's best for Mia. Being with her mom is what's best. Moms are supposed to stay with their kids. The simple certainty in her voice made Ethan's chest tight. Emma's own mother had chosen to leave, and yet here she was, declaring with absolute conviction that mothers and children belong together. The resilience of kids never ceased to amaze him. I think so too, he said quietly. Then tell the judge that.
It doesn't work that way. Why not? You fix things all the time. Fix this. If only it were that simple. After they hung up, Ethan stood at the hotel window, looking out at the small town that had somehow become the center of his world. Riverton at night was mostly dark, a few streetlights, the glow from houses, the lit sign of the diner on Main Street. Nothing like the Manhattan skyline he was used to, but standing here felt more like home than his apartment ever had. His phone rang. Sarah. "The judge ruled," she said without preamble. Ethan's heart stopped. "And?" "Full custody to Nora. Derek gets supervised visitation twice a month if he wants it, but only after completing a parenting course and maintaining consistent employment for 6 months. The relief was so intense, Ethan had to sit down. She won. She won. The judge said Derek's abandonment of his parental responsibilities couldn't be undone just because it became convenient to be a father again. She also noted that Mia has thrived under Nora's care and that disrupting the current arrangement would be detrimental to the child's well-being. "How's Nora?" "Crying. Happy crying, I think, but still crying. I'm at her place now. She wanted me to thank you." "She knows." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Some of it. The employment complaints and the financial irregularities that mysteriously appeared in my office Wednesday night. She knows those helped swing things. She's not stupid, Ethan. She put the pieces together." "Is she angry?" "Honestly, I can't tell. She's too overwhelmed right now to be anything except relieved." "Tell her—" Ethan stopped. What could he possibly say? "Tell her I'm glad Mia's okay." "Tell her yourself. I think you two need to talk." After Sarah hung up, Ethan sat with his phone for a long time, trying to find the courage to call Nora. But what would he say? "Sorry I went behind your back and investigated your ex-husband. Sorry I couldn't just respect your boundaries and let you handle things your way." He decided to wait. Give her tonight to celebrate, to hold her daughter, to breathe for the first time in weeks. There would be time for difficult conversations later. But around 10 o'clock, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood went cold. It was a photo of him taken from across the street, leaving the courthouse on Thursday. And below it, interesting that a New York billionaire shows up for a custody hearing in small-town Pennsylvania. My lawyer might want to know about that. Derek. Ethan's hands tightened on the phone. This was a threat, clear and simple, an attempt to discredit the ruling by implying improper influence. He could ignore it. Derek had lost, and the ruling was final. Or he could respond, which would only give Derek more ammunition. Instead, Ethan forwarded the message to his lawyer with a single instruction: handle this. 20 minutes later, his phone rang. "Derek Wells just received a very detailed letter from my office," his lawyer said, outlining exactly what would happen if he continues to harass anyone connected to this case. Restraining orders, civil suits, and a very thorough investigation into his own activities, including some financial irregularities we discovered at his company. What kind of irregularities? The kind that could interest the IRS. Nothing illegal, probably, but enough to make his life very complicated for the next few years. His lawyer paused. "He won't bother you again. Or Nora. Or anyone else. He's done." "Good." "Ethan, you know this is getting messy, right? The more involved you get." "I know, but it's already messy. Might as well see it through." He hung up and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Nora had won, Mia was safe, and Derek was out of their lives for good. But the cost of that victory was the truth Nora would eventually have to face, that Ethan had orchestrated most of it from the shadows. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly. Ethan drove to Nora's house without calling first, knowing it was probably a mistake, but unable to stop himself. Her car was in the driveway, lights on in the kitchen. When he knocked, it took a long moment before the door opened. Nora stood there in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair wet from a recent shower. She looked exhausted, but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "I figured you'd show up eventually," she said. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside without answering. The house was quiet. Mia must still be asleep. They stood in the small living room, and Ethan suddenly didn't know what to do with his hands. "Congratulations," he said finally, "on the ruling. Thank you for everything you did to make it happen. Nora, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't insult me by pretending you didn't.
Sarah told me about the evidence that mysteriously appeared, the character witnesses who happened to reach out, the lawyer who suddenly had room in her schedule for a pro bono case. Nora's voice wasn't angry, just tired. You orchestrated all of it, didn't you? Not all of it. Sarah's brilliant. She would have won anyway. But you stacked the deck. Ethan couldn't deny it. I did what I thought was necessary, even though I asked you not to. Even though... Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to the window, looking out at the rain. I should be angry. I told you I needed to do this myself, and you ignored that. You went behind my back and threw money at the problem until it went away. I didn't throw money at it. I provided resources. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided you knew better than me what I needed, just like every other person who's tried to fix me. I wasn't trying to fix you. I was trying to help you keep your daughter, without asking if that's how I wanted to be helped. Ethan felt frustration rising. Would you have said yes if I'd asked? Would you have let me hire the investigator, pay for Sarah, dig up dirt on Derek? No. Exactly. So I did what I had to do. And that's the problem, Ethan. You always do what you think you have to do, regardless of what anyone else wants. You're so used to being in control, to solving problems with money and power, that you can't see when people need something different. What did you need? To struggle alone? To lose your daughter because you were too proud to accept help? I needed you to trust me. Nora's voice rose, then immediately dropped. I needed you to believe I was capable of handling this, not to swoop in like some hero and save the day. I do believe you're capable. But that doesn't mean you should have to fight alone. Why not? I've been fighting alone my whole life, and that's exactly the problem. You're so used to being abandoned that you won't let anyone stay. The words hung between them, sharp and true. Nora's face went pale, and for a moment Ethan thought she might ask him to leave. Instead, she sank onto the couch, suddenly looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. You don't understand, she said quietly. When you grow up the way I did, bounced from home to home, never belonging anywhere, you learn that dependence is dangerous. The minute you need someone, they have power over you, and people with power always leave. Ethan sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. Not everyone leaves. Everyone I've ever counted on has. My mom couldn't take care of herself, let alone me. My dad left before I was old enough to remember him. 6 different foster families, and not one of them fought to keep me when things got hard. Derek promised me forever and disappeared the minute it got real. She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. So yes, I have walls, because walls keep you alive when people don't. I'm not Derek. Aren't you? You live 3 hours away, you have a company to run, a life in the city, responsibilities that have nothing to do with this little town. How long before you realize this, she gestured between them, isn't worth the commute? That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. I can, and I am. Nora shook her head. You don't get it. It's not about promises. It's about patterns. People always leave, and the harder you try to convince me you won't, the more certain I become that you will. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for feelings he'd never had to articulate before. Finally, he said, You're right. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you. I probably will, because people are imperfect and relationships are messy. But I can promise that I'm not going to run the first time things get hard. And I can promise that if I screw up, when I screw up, I'll own it and try to do better. That's not enough. What would be enough? I don't know if anything would be. She wiped at her eyes roughly. That's the thing about being broken, Ethan. At some point, you can't be fixed. You just learn to live with the cracks. I don't think you're broken. That's because you don't really know me. Then let me know you. Let me see the cracks in the walls and all the parts you think are too damaged to share. Why? Why do you even care? It was the question Ethan had been avoiding since the day they met. The one that didn't have a rational answer, that couldn't be explained by strategy or logic, or any of the frameworks he used to make sense of the world. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be, he said finally. Before I built walls of my own. Before I decided that success was the only thing that mattered. You remind me that there's more to life than quarterly reports and acquisition strategies. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up for someone who needs you. I don't need you. I know. And maybe that's why I keep showing up anyway. They sat in silence, the rain drumming against the windows. From upstairs came the sound of small footsteps. Mia, waking up. Mommy? Her voice drifted down. Nora stood immediately. I'm here, baby. Come down. Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, still clutching her unicorn, her purple cast bright against the white stuffed animal. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up. Mr. Ethan, did you bring Emma? Not today, sweetheart. She's with her aunt. Oh. Mia's disappointment was immediate and honest. I wanted to show her my cast. It has lots of pictures now. She'll love seeing it next time. Mia came down and climbed into Nora's lap, and Ethan watched the way Nora's entire body relaxed around her daughter. This was what mattered. Not the custody battle, not the money he'd spent, not the strings he'd pulled. Just this, a mother and daughter, together, safe. I should go, Ethan said, standing. Let you guys have your morning. Okay. Nora didn't ask him to stay, but she didn't look relieved he was leaving either. At the door, Ethan paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For going behind your back, for not respecting your boundaries. You deserved better than that. Nora looked at him for a long moment. I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I don't know how to let someone in without being terrified they'll destroy me when they leave. Maybe we figure it out together, one day at a time. Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. Ethan left feeling like he'd lost something he never quite had in the first place. He drove back to the hotel, checked out, and started the long drive back to Manhattan. The rain followed him most of the way, matching his mood. By the time he reached the city, it was late afternoon. Emma was waiting at Rebecca's, and his sister took one look at his face and sent Emma to play in her room. What happened? Rebecca asked. I think I just ruined the best thing that's happened to me in years. Tell me. So he did. The whole story, the investigation, the legal maneuvering, the confrontation that morning. When he finished, Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. You're an idiot, she said finally. Thanks. Very helpful. I'm serious. You're brilliant at business and completely incompetent at relationships. I was trying to help her. No, you were trying to control the situation. There's a difference. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Nora needed to know she could handle this on her own, that she was strong enough, capable enough, worthy enough to fight for her daughter without someone else doing it for her. And you took that from her. I kept her from losing her daughter. Did you? Or did Sarah Chen keep her from losing her daughter with resources you provided? Because from where I'm sitting, Nora did the hard part. She showed up in court. She testified. She faced down her ex. All you did was make sure she had the ammunition she needed. Ethan thought about that. So what should I have done differently? You should have been honest, told her what resources you could provide and let her decide whether to accept them. Instead, you made the decision for her, which is exactly what every other person in her life has done. She would have said no. Maybe. Or maybe she would have surprised you, but now you'll never know, because you didn't give her the choice. Rebecca was right, and Ethan hated it. He'd spent his whole life solving problems, and now the biggest problem he faced couldn't be fixed with money or connections or strategy. It required something much harder, trust. The next week passed in a fog. Ethan went through the motions at work, meetings, calls, decisions, but his heart wasn't in it. Marcus noticed, but had the grace not to comment. Emma noticed too, and she was less subtle. Are you sad because of Miss Nora? She asked one night at dinner. I'm not sad, sweetheart. You're doing the face. What face? The one you do when you're pretending everything's fine, but it's not. 5 years old and reading him like a book. Things are complicated right now, Ethan admitted. Did you have a fight? Sort of. I made a mistake, and she's upset about it. Did you say you're sorry? I did. And she didn't forgive you? It's more complicated than that. Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Emma considered this seriously. Then you have to show her you mean it. That's what you told me when I broke Kayla's toy. Remember? You said saying sorry is important, but showing you're sorry matters more. Out of the mouths of babes again. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan sat at his desk and did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter on good paper. He wrote about why he'd done what he'd done. Not to justify it, but to explain it. about how watching her struggle had been physically painful, how the thought of her losing Mia had kept him awake at night, how he'd convinced himself that results mattered more than process. He wrote about his own walls, his own fears, about how he'd spent so long protecting himself from vulnerability that he'd forgotten how to let people in, about how she'd changed that, whether she meant to or not. And he wrote about what he wanted, not promises or guarantees, just the chance to try, to show up, to stay present, to prove that not everyone leaves. He didn't know if she'd read it, didn't know if it would change anything. But Emma was right. Sometimes you had to show people, not just tell them. He mailed it the next morning and tried not to obsess over whether she'd received it. 3 days passed with no response. Then a week. Ethan told himself it didn't matter, that he'd said what he needed to say regardless of her reply. But it did matter. It mattered so much, it ached. On a Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca called. The library's having a fundraiser this weekend, book sale and community dinner. Nora asked if Emma might want to come. Ethan's heart jumped. She asked for Emma. And you. She specifically said to invite both of you. Did she say anything else? That's all I got. But Ethan, I think you should go. What if it makes things worse? What if it makes things better? Saturday morning, Ethan and Emma made the familiar drive to Riverton. Emma chattered the whole way about what books she wanted to find, about whether Mia's cast was off yet, about whether the library castle would be open for playing. Ethan tried to focus on driving and not on the anxiety churning in his stomach. The library parking lot was packed when they arrived. Inside, the place had been transformed. Tables of used books, baked goods for sale, kids running around with their parents. The community had turned out in force. Ethan found Nora at a table near the children's section, organizing books with Margaret. When she saw him, she went still for just a moment. Then she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. "You came," she said. "You invited us." "I did." She looked at Emma. "Mia's in the castle. She's been asking about you all morning." Emma took off without waiting for permission, and suddenly Ethan and Nora were alone in a crowd of people. "I got your letter," Nora said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would. I've read it about 20 times, trying to decide if I believe you." And I want to, but wanting isn't the same as being able to." "I know." Margaret appeared, oblivious to the tension. "Nora, we need more children's books up front. Could you grab a few boxes from the back?" "I'll help," Ethan offered. They walked through the library to the storage room, away from the crowd. Surrounded by dusty boxes and old furniture, Nora finally turned to face him fully. "I'm terrified," she said. "Of this. Of you. Of what it means to let someone matter." "I'm terrified too." "You don't seem like someone who's afraid of anything." "That's because I'm good at pretending, but the truth? I'm terrified that I'll mess this up, that I'll hurt you without meaning to, that one day you'll realize I'm not worth the risk." Nora was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about what you said, about figuring it out together, and I realized something. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I don't need anyone, that I'm strong enough, capable enough, independent enough to handle everything alone. But maybe that's not strength. Maybe that's just fear with a different name. So what do? We try, we mess up, we figure it out." She took a breath. "But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you're going to help me, if I'm going to let you help me, I need you to be honest. No more orchestrating things from behind the scenes. No more making decisions for me because you think you know better. We're partners or we're nothing." "Partners," Ethan said. "I promise." "Okay." Nora smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Then I guess we're trying this." "I guess we are." They stood there in the storage room, surrounded by forgotten things, and Ethan felt something shift. Not into place, that implied a perfection they'd never achieve, but into possibility. Back in the main hall, the fundraiser was in full swing. Emma and Mia had recruited other kids into an elaborate game involving the castle and a dragon that seemed to be played entirely through interpretive dance. Nora and Ethan ended up at a table with Margaret and several other library volunteers, listening to stories about the town's history. At some point, Nora's hand found Ethan's under the table. He squeezed gently, and she squeezed back. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more fights, more misunderstandings, more moments when their different worlds collided in uncomfortable ways. Ethan would still struggle with his need to fix things, and Nora would still struggle with her fear of depending on anyone, but they'd figure it out, together. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation turned to the library's future. The renovations were complete, but they needed sustainable funding to keep the children's section staffed and stocked. "We've applied for grants," the library director said. "But honestly, we need a major donor, someone willing to commit to ongoing support, not just a one-time donation." Ethan felt Nora's eyes on him, but didn't meet them. Instead, he said, "What if you set up an endowment, a fund that generates interest to cover operating costs? That would take a substantial initial investment." "How substantial?" The director named a figure that made several people at the table wince, but Ethan just nodded thoughtfully. Later, when they were alone again, Nora said, "You're thinking about funding it, aren't you? Would that bother you?" "A month ago, yes. Now?" She considered. "I think it would depend on how you did it. What if I didn't do it? What if I just connected the library with people who might be interested in funding it, made some introductions, let them make their own decisions? That would be different. That would be helping without controlling." Then that's what I'll do." Nora smiled. "Look at you, learning boundaries. I have a good teacher." As the sun started to set, families began packing up to leave. Emma and Mia were exhausted from playing, both girls quiet for once. Nora walked them out to the car, Mia on her hip. "When will we see you again?" Mia asked Emma. Emma looked at her father, who looked at Nora. "How about next weekend?" Nora said, "if that works for you guys." "Every weekend?" Emma's eyes went wide. "We'll figure out a schedule," Ethan said. "But yeah, more often than we have been." "Does that mean you're dating Miss Nora?" Emma asked with the bluntness only children could manage. Ethan felt his face heat, but Nora just laughed. "I think it means we're trying to," she said. "Is that okay with you?" "It's okay if you're nice to my daddy, and if we get to play with Mia." "I'll be very nice to your daddy, promise." They said their goodbyes, and as Ethan drove away, he watched Nora and Mia in the rearview mirror, standing under the library lights, waving. "Are you happy now?" Emma asked. "Getting there," Ethan said. "Getting there." The next few months weren't easy. Coordinating schedules between New York and Riverton took effort. There were weekends when work emergencies kept Ethan from making the drive, and Emma's disappointment felt like a knife. There were times when Nora's walls went back up, and Ethan had to remind himself that trust was built slowly, in small moments, not grand gestures. But there were good moments too. Emma's 6th birthday party at the library, with Mia as guest of honor. Thanksgiving at Rebecca's farmhouse with both families. The weekend Ethan taught Emma and Mia to ice skate, and they all ended up laughing on the ice more than actually skating. And there were quiet moments. Late-night phone calls when Emma was asleep and Nora had finally gotten Mia down. Conversations about nothing and everything. Learning each other's rhythms, each other's fears, each other's hopes. 6 months after the custody hearing, Ethan made a decision. He promoted Marcus to CEO of the New York office and opened a second headquarters in Pennsylvania. Not in Riverton, the town was too small, but close enough that he could commute. "You're really doing this," Rebecca said when he told her. "Restructuring your entire life for a woman you've known less than a year." "I'm restructuring my life for me," Ethan corrected. "Nora's just the reason I finally had the courage to do it." "And Emma?" "Emma's thrilled. She gets to see Mia all the time, she gets a yard to play in instead of a Manhattan apartment, and I'm around more. It's a win all around." "You sound happy." "I am. For the first time in, I don't know, maybe ever." The library endowment came through, funded by a combination of Ethan's connections and genuinely interested donors. Nora went full-time, then was promoted to Children's Librarian Coordinator. She hired 2 assistants and started a literacy program for at-risk kids. On a Saturday morning in early spring, Ethan found himself back at the library for the opening of a new reading program. The place was packed with families, and Nora was in her element, directing traffic, greeting kids by name, making everyone feel welcome. He watched her from across the room, this woman who'd been so guarded when they met, now open and alive in a space she'd helped create. Emma and Mia were reading together in the castle, their heads bent over a picture book. They'd become inseparable, these 2 girls who'd found each other by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe some things were just meant to happen. Nora caught his eye and smiled. then gestured for him to come over. He wove through the crowd to her side. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said, pulling him toward a nervous-looking teenager. "This is Alex. He's interested in computer programming, and I thought maybe you could tell him about what you do." Ethan spent the next 20 minutes talking to the kid about coding and tech and opportunities that existed even in small towns if you knew where to look. When he finished, Alex's eyes were bright with possibility. "Thank you," the kid said. "Really, thank you." After he left, Nora slipped her hand into Ethan's. "You're good at that. Seeing potential in people." "I learned from the best." "Oh yeah? Who?" "A librarian I know. She's pretty amazing." Nora laughed and pulled him toward the back office, away from the crowd. Once they were alone, she turned to face him. "I have something to tell you," she said. "Okay." "I got an offer to write a book about literacy programs in underserved communities. A publisher reached out after seeing an article about the library's success." "Nora, that's incredible. Congratulations." "Thanks. But here's the thing. It would mean traveling. Not a lot, but some. And I've never—" She stopped, frustrated. "I've never had the luxury of thinking about my career as something more than survival. But now, with the library stable and Mia settled and you—" She looked at him. "I think I want to try to build something that matters beyond just this town." "Then you should absolutely do it." "But what about what? We'll figure it out. That's what we do." Nora's eyes were bright. "When did you get so good at this?" "I had a good teacher," Ethan said again. "Someone who taught me that the best things in life are the ones you build together." She kissed him then, soft and sure, and Ethan felt the last of his walls come down. They'd both spent so long protecting themselves, him with success, her with independence, that they'd almost missed this. The terrifying, wonderful possibility of letting someone see you completely and choosing to stay anyway. Outside the office, the library hummed with life. Kids laughing, parents chatting, the rustle of pages turning. A community built around books and hope, and the belief that everyone deserved a place to belong. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was real. And it was theirs. That evening, after the event wrapped up, and the last families trickled out, Nora locked the library doors. Emma and Mia had fallen asleep in the castle, curled up together with a pile of books. "We should probably get them home," Nora said, but she didn't move to wake them. "Probably," Ethan agreed, equally still. They stood there in the quiet library, watching their daughters sleep, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought him here. From that first uncomfortable blind date to this moment, standing beside a woman who'd taught him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that the best things in life couldn't be purchased or controlled. "I love you," he said. Not because the moment called for it, but because it was true, and he was tired of keeping important things unsaid. Nora turned to look at him, surprise and joy and fear all mixed together in her expression. You don't just say that." "Why not?" Because... She stopped, took a breath. "Because what if you change your mind?" "I won't." "You can't know that." "No," Ethan admitted. "I can't. But I can choose it, every day. I can choose you, and this, and us. That's what love is, isn't it? Not a feeling that happens to you, but a choice you keep making." Nora was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I love you too, and that terrifies me." "Good. If we're going to do this, we should both be terrified." She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. They woke the girls gently and walked out into the spring evening. The streetlights were coming on, casting soft pools of light across the library steps. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. "Come home with me," Nora said. "For dinner. It won't be fancy, but it'll be perfect," Ethan finished. And it was. Pasta that boiled over while they were distracted, mismatched plates, wine for the adults, and juice boxes for the kids. Emma and Mia at the table arguing about which fairy tale character was bravest while Nora and Ethan exchanged looks across the chaos. This was it. Not the fairy tale ending where everything was magically fixed and everyone lived happily ever after, but the real ending, where two damaged people found each other and chose to build something together despite their fears. where single parents juggled work and kids and tried to carve out moments for themselves, where love wasn't a feeling that solved everything, but a decision to show up, even when it was hard. Later, after Emma and Mia were asleep and Nora and Ethan sat on the porch in the cooling night, she said, "I never thought I'd have this. A family, someone who stays. Neither did I. Are we really going to make this work? The distance, the complications, all of it?" "Yes." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know what my life looks like without you in it. And I know what it looks like now, and I choose now." Nora leaned against him, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that, watching the stars come out, and he thought about all the years he'd spent building walls and chasing success, trying to prove something to people who'd never cared. He'd had it backwards. Success wasn't something you built alone. It was something you found in moments like this, messy, imperfect, real moments with people who saw all your flaws and chose you anyway. A month later, Ethan signed the papers to sell his Manhattan apartment. A month after that, he closed on a house in Riverton. Nothing fancy, just a solid place with a yard where Emma and Mia could play. He proposed to Nora on a random Tuesday in the library's storage room of all places, with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. It wasn't romantic or planned. She'd just said something that made him laugh, and he'd realized he wanted to laugh with her for the rest of his life. "Is that a yes?" he asked when she just stared at him, speechless. "You're serious?" "Completely. We've only been together for 8 months. Has it felt short to you?" "No, it's felt like—" She stopped, started again. "It's felt like coming home." "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes, but we're doing this our way. No giant wedding, no pressure, no timeline that doesn't work for us. Whatever you want. And I keep my name. Okay? And we're equals, real equals. No more grand gestures without discussing them first. Promise." And she stopped, tears streaming down her face. "And you have to promise you'll stay, even when I'm difficult, even when I push you away because I'm scared. You have to promise." "I promise," Ethan said. "I'm not going anywhere." They got married 6 months later in the library, surrounded by books and friends and the community that had brought them together. Emma and Mia were flower girls giggling their way down the aisle. Rebecca cried through the entire ceremony. Margaret had insisted on making the cake. It wasn't perfect. The sound system cut out during the vows, and someone's kid knocked over the punch bowl, and Ethan forgot his speech and had to improvise. But standing there with Nora's hand in his, watching her smile through happy tears, Ethan finally understood what he'd been searching for all those years. Not success, not validation, not proof that he was enough. Just this. Just love, messy and real and worth every risk. The reception lasted long into the night, and when it finally ended, Ethan and Nora stood on the library steps, watching their families and friends drift away into the darkness. "We did it," Nora said. "We did." "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Good." She squeezed his hand. "Me too." And that, Ethan thought, was exactly how it should be. Two people equally terrified, choosing each other anyway. They walked home together through the quiet streets of Riverton, Emma and Mia already asleep in Rebecca's care for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Nora's book deadline, Ethan's business expansion, the 1,000 small fires that came with building a blended family. But tonight was just theirs. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan wasn't planning 3 steps ahead. He wasn't strategizing or problem-solving or trying to control the outcome. He was just here, present, with the woman he loved and the life they were building together, one day at a time, one choice at a time. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.